with sun. But I honestly feel like this is the most important discussion you could have in the world of Shakta theory and practice. Because we're Shaktas in the sense that we practice that kind of Tantra that centralizes a theistic conception of God as woman. So we say God is a woman. And this goes far beyond just Sanskrit gendered terms. Like the word Prakriti or the word Shakti doesn't have to mean biological gender. Obviously in Sanskrit, words are gendered, but the gender of a word doesn't refer to sociological or biological gender. So for example, in France, like if I were to say la table, like if I were to say les poissons, I'm like gendering the word table and I'm gendering the word fish, but I'm not actually saying the table is gendered or sexually a woman. There's no biological or sociological implication to the table there. And more importantly, the fish can also be biologically male or biologically female or biologically androgynous or whatever, but I might still say le poisson, right? Le is masculine and la is feminine. So notice, this is grammatical gender. And like the German language, like French, like Sanskrit, many languages have this concept of grammatical gender. So the word prakriti, it ends in that E word, like Devi versus Deva. So prakriti. And then the word shakti, the word maya. Notice it's maya with the long A at the end, genders it feminine. So almost all the words that we use for earth, prithvi, for nature, prakriti, for dynamism and movement, shakti, and of course for this reality, which even if you want to call it an illusion, you will still refer to it as a feminine form, maya. You see, so the illusionist or the confoundress, the magic of this universe, if this universe is described as the magical display of phenomenon, that too is gendered grammatically as a woman. So Maya, Shakti, Prithvi, Prakriti, these Chatush Anda, these four eggs of reality. And then even the word Anda means egg. Egg refers also to biological femininity in one sense. So notice now when we get into like Vedic cosmology, we describe the universe as the Brahmanda, the cosmic egg, if you will. And there are 14 like levels of reality, like 7 like hell realms and 7 quote unquote heaven realms. And like each of these realms are all contained within this universe. And this universe in the Vedic worldview is one of many. That's the crazy thing. Like, there's a multiverse theory available to us in, like, the Vedic world. Okay, also, I'm gonna be kind of crazy right now. I hope you don't mind. Because, like, I just saw Kalidasi and the Phoenix Sangha, and it was a fucking awesome, crazy time that I'll tell you about, because I've got some anecdotes from that adventure that informed this talk. But also, I just woke up, and by God's grace, like, managed to wake up in time for this lecture, because I keep missing these 7 p.m. lectures whenever I go on these, like, benders. But also, in this, like, liminal state of like waking and dreaming, discussing some of the most liminal ideas that we could ever talk about as a community, maybe the most important ideas and the slipperiest ideas involving definitions about that thing which resists definitions. Like, I also think this is some of my favorite ideas that I've ever thought about in this like boy's head. You know, like just yesterday, whatever the fuck yesterday meant, at some point during this adventure, I'm on a rooftop in downtown Phoenix. I'm just like pacing this roof. And I'm thinking like, this is the coolest thing I've ever thought about, I think. You know, and I have this like theory, and it's a bit cracked out, so like you'll have to forgive me because I'm gonna get a bit wild discussing it, because a lot of this is just these links that I'm still developing in my mind, but it involves the Epic of Gilgamesh, and something I noticed in the in the narrative of Marduk, the quintessential masculine storm god, like representing your like society's idea of the jock, toxic masculine ideal of the warrior, like lightning god or whatever. So like you have Marduk, and then you have Tiamat, the dragon, which is such a wonderful, like, universal cross-cultural image for the woman. The woman as snake, the woman as dragon, the woman as dynamic serpentine force, but more importantly, the woman as primordial creatrix, the woman that represents nature. So like Tiamat has a link, as it were, to the word Prakriti, nature. Because like Prakriti, Tiamat is feminine in conception, at least grammatically, but also sociologically and biologically as well. Like, she's a goddess. Tiamat is a goddess. And Marduk is a god. And something happens around like 1900 BC, I think. Like, there's like a moment. I forget exactly the dating here. Again, this lecture is not really like as researched as it could be. It's just a thought that I had on the plane coming back today. And I was like thinking about it for some time in various different points of my life. So it's like, I could maybe come back to this with some finer brushstrokes. But broadly speaking, here's my theory. And I'm going to get into it, like, in depth later. But I'm just going to tell you why this is going to be kind of a crazy and scattered talk, and strap in, buckle up, let's go. I'm probably going to talk really fast and like wave my hands wildly and move about a lot, so like brace yourself. But Tiamat is the goddess, and Marduk is like a god, or god as a masculine form. And in this narrative, Marduk kills Tiamat, and it's celebrated as a great victory. But here's the thing, he doesn't just kill her, right? It's like, this is really interesting. In the narrative, he kills her and chops her into little pieces. That action of the masculine chopping up the feminine, I think, is incredibly symbolically suggestive and incredibly powerful, and it has a lot of practical value for us as Shaktas when we consider masculinity and femininity not as features of the world outside of us, either grammatical, biological, or sociological, but as features of one's own psyche. So notice, like, in the conversation that we just had, and by the way, I feel like that should be the lecture, because right before I hit record, that was the most valuable part of anything we're going to hear tonight, right? And I'll tell you why in just a little bit. But notice, a lot of our conversation is about what it is to be a woman as a body or as a person in the world, right? And that's a beautiful conversation. I'm going to engage with that. I think that's a very, very important conversation. But I also think that the interiority of the yogic culture allows us to have this discussion without referencing those things at all. Like, without making any, like, linguistic, grammatical points, without referencing biology or genitals, without even referencing sociological or cultural experiences, without even talking about one's experience in the world. We could still talk about femininity and, in a sense, decenter biology, sociology, and even linguistics. Like, we can move the conversation about masculine and feminine away from all of these spheres, not to dodge the issue. Of course, we're going to talk about it in those spheres too. But we can move or recenter the psychological experience as the domain in which this discussion can be had. So we're obviously going to take an Ardha Nareshwara idea, or maybe even a Jungian, like, animus idea, and say that, like, I'm as much a woman as anyone is woman, and I'm as much a man as anyone is as much a man. Because the way I'm going to use those terms is to define features of the psyche, which in modern psychology you could say the conscious and subconscious mind. Which I'm almost going to call the symbolic, image-based, flexible, ambiguous subconscious mind the woman, or Tiamat, the dragon. And I'm going to call the conscious mind the man. And then I'm going to use the symbology of Kali dancing on Shiva to make a psychological point, actually. And it's a psychological point that is so subtle that it borders on the highest spirituality, which of course even transcends that, even transcends the mind. So spirituality is so universal and beautiful because it's a conversation that goes beyond biology. Like, what kind of biology you have. Like, a woman post, like we just were talking about earlier, I think Aisha Ma and Sonuma were having this, like, deep and beautiful discussion about like breast cancer and breast surgery. Like, to what extent do genitals define a woman? Like, the politics around breasts. Or even covering one's breasts, right? There's, like, interesting conversations around that. Or the politics around the yoni, for instance. Is that what makes a woman a woman? And then there was some ambiguity there. And it was like, well, why would that notion of physical gender confine a person to the experience of being a woman? Like, and then the question was, a woman, even if she had the biological markers that society would say belong to a woman, she could have them removed and still be a woman. Or a person might not have those biological markers and still experience the world as a woman, sociologically speaking. Like, that was a really subtle and beautiful discussion, right? And notice, the concepts of spirituality are so universal because they are so far beyond the limiting features of the body and mind. So therefore, whatever genitals you might be born with, or lack thereof, and whatever sociological or cultural things that are imposed upon you or that you opt into, none of that matters when it comes to spirituality. Because the topics and interests of us who are spiritual are not about the body or mind, necessarily. They include issues of the body and mind. Necessarily, all spiritual conversations will be political. Nobody can deny that. But only inadvertently and elliptically. The concepts of spirituality are so universal because they are not based on culture and not based on the body, and therefore they are so inclusive, because whatever kind of body you have or don't have, we don't have to be carbon-based life forms even to participate in spirituality, and whatever kind of mind you have or don't have, like, doesn't matter actually. Spirituality is not really about that. And so notice, as I make these psychological points, obviously while engaging the philosophical, political, and biological and linguistic points even, I'm actually going to, like, inch towards that which is beyond psychology. So this conversation is about that which is hardest to talk about. It's about that which actually cannot be talked about except poetically and elliptically. It is that which needs to be talked about because, after all, defining a woman is central to the Shakta theology that argues that God is a woman, right? We first have to understand what the fuck is God, but more importantly, we have to understand what the fuck is woman before we make the statement, God is a woman. And it's the most important statement we can make in the Shakta world. That's why the great Rishi Ariana Grande must be credited here, the great American Rishi, because her claim that God is a woman is indeed the TLDR of all Shaktism. But, like, she's there on her throne, the Parameshwari, Ariana Grande Devi, and one by one, we jesters, me and others, will stand before her and try to explain what it is we think a woman is. And she'll say thank you next. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put a bunch of ideas in front of you about what a woman is, referencing this myth of Marduk slaying Tiamat. And there's one more piece of data here, which I think is incredibly important and stunning, because I also noticed, historically speaking, and again, I could be wrong here, this lecture could be way better research than it is. I could be way better slept than I am. But honestly, I think this is the best that I'm ever going to be in intellectually, like this cracked out state. So like, if this is true, and again, I'm not saying it is, I just think it is, it's just like a speculation, it's like my feeling, then it could be really important. As far as I know, historically speaking, when in Mesopotamia, that narrative of Marduk slaying Tiamat became dominant as the dominant kind of mythological structure of that region, which of course would have an influence on Zoroastrianism and influence on Christianity and influence on the way we now in 2026 conceive of femininity. It was also significant, historically significant, that around the same time in Babylon, I think, like Hammurabi, the king, he inscribes into a stone rules. This is really interesting because this is like the first time the law is codified as impersonal words on a literal stone. You know, it's like carved into a stone. It's like written in stone. And the moment that happens, you guys, it changes the way we dispense justice. You know, because arguably, you know, when Rwandan genocide occurred, what happened was the International Criminal Court had trouble like doing subpoenas and stuff like that. It was really difficult to like figure out what to do in that post-war reconstructionist activity. So then they just like left it to many rural communities in Rwanda to figure out their own justice systems, and a lot of them just did their traditional justice systems, which were called Gakaka courts. And those Gakaka courts were like communal justice systems that were very different from the courts of the West and the courts of the modern world, post-British colonies especially. So the Gakaka courts were like not any written law with legal precedent, as far as I know. I wasn't there, and I have a very superficial understanding of this, so just like bear with me. But as far as I understand, it's like it's communal justice where the goal is not punitive justice, but more restorative and rehabilitative justice. But it involves people sitting in a circle, and in like a la Native American dialogue approach, they would just like pass a talking stick almost, as it were, and just have conversations. And as a community, decide what justice looked like what compensation would look like for the victims and what rehabilitation would look like for the quote-unquote aggressor. But it was a communally arrived at discussion. It was not based on books or precedent. It was not based on writing on the rocks or anything like that. It was based on a conversation, and every case is judged by its own conditions, irrespective of other cases. So it's a case-by-case basis kind of thing, which is very different from the legal precedent idea that we find in the Western world or in the, you know, imperial colonial concept of justice. So these Gakaka courts, the way that we did justice there in Rwanda post the genocide, is very much like how much of the world in early Neolithic communities would do justice. And much of the world today still, in rural, autochthonous, maybe I would say tribal settings, do justice. You don't like go to court and read a book. And the book is not more powerful than the person. Words don't mean more than the feelings in the circle. And that moment is more important than what happened before and what will happen after. So there's something about that form of justice that's important. Anyway, all of that changes with Hammurabi stone. So when Hammurabi inscribes law into the stone, now law becomes king. That's a Jack London quote, and it's celebrated. But if law is king, notice what happens. An abstract concept based on words, logic, and definition is now more important than symbolic, imagistic, emotion-oriented, in the moment relation between human beings, which is far less predictable and far more ambiguous. So we opt for the simplistic, predictable, defined version of law because it gives us a sense of safety that we sometimes find is not available in the more amorphous, more ambiguous, more confrontational, more conversation-oriented, more imagistic, more symbolic version of law, which we practice in early Neolithic communities. It's another point that in early Neolithic communities, they tended to be goddess worshippers. And then the moment Marduk kills Tiamat, as it were, historically speaking, we enter this kind of like axial age of the masculine. It's like the pendulum swings into the age of the masculine, which I'm going to define as the dominance of the conscious mind over the subconscious mind, the dominance of logic, language, and concept over the amorphous and seemingly unpredictable oceanic subconscious, the imagery of the subconscious mind. You see this in Egypt too, with concepts of like Nun and the early concepts of primordial ocean and Tefnut and Nun and things like that, and how like male gods like Amon-Ra and others like that will slowly replace those feminine conceptions of primordial nature. And what you also find, not just with the Marduk slaying Tiamat motif, and not just with the Hammurabi inscribing on the stone motif, you also find that there is, as we move into the like late Neolithic stages and we move away from goddess worship, you find there's more transcendentalism in religion. So from a religious point of view, now the idea is that there is a heaven realm beyond this world, which then frames this world as bad, which necessarily then frames the body, through which the world is given, as bad. So when you move deeper into the Neolithic phase, especially when you get to this moment now in late stage consumer capitalism, the woman's body, whatever the fuck a woman is and whatever the fuck a body is, both words that we shouldn't take for granted, those two things are cultural commodities that can be bought and sold. Like women become property, as it were, in the Neolithic era. And this, interestingly, historically, coincides with the dominance of the Marduk slaying Tiamat myth. It coincides with the historical facts, like the change in the justice system and the codification of the law. It coincides also with religious attitudes that now become more ascetic, more world-hating. And that's all very important, because those are the things that Shakta philosophy resists and rejects and argues against. So the thing about this conversation that's so cool to me is there's no way to have it in a simple way. I'm going to just refer to a bunch of seemingly random facts. We'll talk about Hammurabi. We'll talk about Marduk. We'll talk about Sanskrit grammar. We'll talk about Gakaka courts. We'll talk about all these various things, and they're not going to seem like they make much sense next to one another, but they're all elliptically pointing to something. So this conversation is symbolic. It's elliptical. It's poetic. And it's dynamic. It must be. And it's liminal and ambiguous and unpredictable. So I want to approach this conversation using the faculties of the conscious mind, logic, reason, language, concept, but in service of something far more profound. That wild-haired goddess, naked and free, who dances atop the corpse of this conscious, meaning-making mind. That's why it's going to be a pretty cracked-out lecture, I think. Because it's like an idea that I'm still developing and that I will never fully develop, because to fully confine it and develop it and define it would be to kill it. The name killeth. And that would be Shiva killing Kali, which, arguably has been happening since Marduk slayed Tiamat. But the Shakta philosophy now presents a different way of being in the world, of Shiva lying down, holding space for Kali's wild and erratic dance. It's not the omission of Shiva. The conscious mind still has a role to play, otherwise we wouldn't be talking right now. We would be singing, dancing, ingesting intoxicants, and whirling about in a circle. We would be practicing feminine forms of religion that we did in the early Neolithic era. All things that were called Vamachara now, and all things that are persecuted now. So it's a really interesting thing. It's like there's so much at stake in this conversation. And I think the first point I want to say is that there's so much at stake. And there's so much to do. And it's very difficult and wonderful to do. So if you'll bear with me, that's where I think this discussion is going to go. Of course, we're going to talk about Ramakrishna, who confounds our idea of biological gender and sociological gender. We'll talk about Vivekananda, who is perhaps one of the most progressive feminists of all time, whose feminist political ideas were way ahead of their time, like in the 1890s. Oh my God. He was able to say things that only now we're able to articulate in our modern feminist discourse, So we'll, of course, engage with certain feminism ideas and things like that. Ideally all three waves and where we find ourselves now, all of that. It's going to be a lot. So let's see what happens. But mainly what I want to do, my main thesis, as it were, in this little abstract of sorts, is this. I want to move the discussion about femininity away from the body and mind and towards something in the deepest recesses of the mind, towards the subconscious mind, to use a Freudian term, or a collective unconscious, to use a Jungian term. You can see parallels in Jordan Peterson too, right? Where you have modern demagogues like him who would say the first step in psychological wellness is you have to kill the dragon or something. Or it's a fight against the dragon. In one sense, Jordan Peterson in that statement is representing the conscious mind's war against the unpredictable, symbolic, unconscious mind. And I've never read Jordan Peterson at all, or enough to be able to speak confidently on this, but I know that a lot of people in that camp, they might be making a Jungian statement here, but in defense of Marduk, maybe. In defense of the conscious mind. As an attempt to quell and quieten and subjugate. Not necessarily kill, but at least tame that wild dragon of the subconscious mind. And I'm going to say that's Kali, the wild, unpredictable, symbolic, imagistic ocean, the void that is the infinite potential of the subconscious, filled as it is with all collective unconscious symbols, and a scary thing, necessarily. And I'm going to say that the mind, as we understand it, the conscious mind, the buddhi, the manas, the ahankara, chitta, all those functions of the mind that more or less we have under our control, or that is at least more or less conscious or cognitively available to us, I'm going to say that all of those things can be called Shiva, or the conscious mind. And so the conscious mind lying down so that Kali can dance wild and free, that's the psychological image of what it looks like to be liberated in our tradition. To be Shiva is to lie down, and to be Kali is to dance mad with joy. And the goal here is neither to be Shiva nor Kali, but to be that composite form of the conscious mind holding space for the wild ecstatic dance of the unconscious. That Ardha Nareshwara idea is ultimately what I'm going for. So at the end of this lecture, if I'm successful in presenting these ideas to you, and again, the queen is that Ariana Grande who sits upon the throne, and I am but the jester that is going to do a dance. And the most important thing that can happen in this lecture is at the end, I'll open the floor again, and we'll just I'm going to ask you, what do you think? To the women in this room. And again, hopefully by the end of this discussion, you won't think that you're a woman because of genitals. You won't think that you're a woman because of cultural or sociological roles. You'll understand that you are a woman. You cannot not be a woman. It's the most intimate and primordial function of humanity, that everyone is a woman. I could even make a biological point here about how X chromosomes and Y chromosomes, it's okay, I don't need to do that. But there's a whole interesting discussion there too, about how Y chromosomes are kind of the aberration, or sort of arguably a later feature where the basis is X actually. And then we could say there is not one person here who is not a woman. There's not one object, table or thing who's not a woman. And then arguably we can say there's also not one thing that is not a man. Because, like somebody pointed out earlier, when we have conversations about spectrums and binaries, you'll see that this discussion is so deep as to be so inclusive. Often the deeper you go, the more inclusive you go. The higher up you go, the more you can see. So to the deeper you go, the more you can contain. So if I'm successful at all in this discussion, we'll go so deep into the psyche that we'll be able to contain and include such that everyone here will feel like a woman. That being said though, hopefully we can open the floor at the end and just ask all those who identify as a woman, which is just a matter of choice, or I would even argue a matter of recognition. Everyone is a woman. Some people just don't recognize that they are. But when we get to the end, those who identify as women, I want to just ask you, as the jester before the throne, what the fuck did you think? How did I do? And this is why I thought that discussion we just had before we started the recording, I'm so disappointed that I forgot to hit record for that. And I want to have it again at the end, because it was perhaps the most important part of the lecture, right? Because just for 30 or so minutes, just however long it was so interesting, just everyone who identified as a woman, uniquely talking about what it meant to be a woman. And I noticed, I asked the question, what do you guys think a woman is? And it was those people in the room who identify as women who then spoke about it, right? And Shunya's insight is so important. Shunya's I don't identify as a woman, I identify as non-binary because of this, the ambiguity of what it is to be a man or woman. And those who identify as a woman were well, this is my cultural experience. And what was really cool about that is we could hear Eshama and Sonuma describe the cultural experience of an Indian woman, and then Kalidasi describing the experience of an American woman. But also, what was it like to be an American woman in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and what is it like to articulate femininity in a post-gender political discussion of the 2020s, for instance? This is across time, it's across cultures, it's across biological dispositions, like that breast cancer conversation you guys were having. So that to me was the most valuable part of our discussion today. Not what's going to happen in the next hour or two. That's just going to be me presenting some cracked out ideas that I was thinking about on my bender in Phoenix on a rooftop in downtown Phoenix, right? That's what I'm going to do for the next 2 hours. But it's going to be way more interesting, I think, to just open the floor again and do what we just did again, in light of all the things that I'm going to say in a crazy cracked out way in the next 2 hours. So that's the plan for tonight. And the reason why this is important is because I'll start with this, with Swami Vivekananda. And I'll repeat this idea. I just talked about it earlier, but I think it's an important idea for the lecture, because Swami Vivekananda was perhaps one of the most progressive feminist thinkers of his time, mostly because he avoided issues of gender when it came to biological gender and cultural gender, because he was focusing on spiritual gender. He's talking about Kali, and he is a Shakta. So remember, Swami Vivekananda is a worshipper of the goddess, a worshipper of Kali. The god is defined as a woman. But he's also the student of one of the greatest, most prominent Shaktas of all time. Swami Vivekananda is the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna's Ishta is Kali. That means Sri Ramakrishna, although he practices all the forms of religion, Christianity, and all the forms of Hinduism, Vaishnavism, and of course, these are forms of Hinduism that have a patriarchal idea of God. And again, patriarchy not in the pejorative sense. Here he's saying the paths of Christianity, the paths of Islam, and Christianity and Islam, of course, see God as the Father, and Islam maybe less so. But then in Hinduism, most of those forms also see God as maybe a masculine form, or the ruler of the cosmos, like Krishna, or like Vishnu, or like Rama or something. Sri Ramakrishna practices all of these, but you have to remember that he starts with Kali, as it were, and he ends with Kali. So it's not like he's a priest in the Kali temple, practices a bunch of religions, and stops being a priest in the Kali temple. He remains a priest in the Kali temple. And more importantly, he continues to use Kali, the goddess, as his central image for divinity throughout his life, even after practicing all the religions. So in one sense, you could say there's some unique feature about Shaktism that allows a person to participate in all the spiritual practices and come out the other end maintaining their concept of God as a woman. So the concept that God is a woman, there's like that femininity of God allows Sri Ramakrishna the flexibility and the liminality to be a citizen of many, many different places, as it were. He's a Muslim and a Christian and a Vaishnava and a Shaiva. And it's because of his Shaktism, I'm going to say, that he's able to do that. But that Shaktism is interestingly intact by the time he finishes doing all of this thing. So he ends up saying God is a woman at the end even. He starts by saying God is a woman, which allows him to like experience God in all these different ways. And he ends by saying Kali, Kali, Kali. The last thing he ever said in his life when he kicks his body at age 50 was Kali, 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 allegedly. Some people say he said Om, but again, Om is Kali. So we don't actually know. There's debate as to what his final words were, but a lot of the accounts say he said Kali 3 times in the middle of the night, like 1 or 2 in the morning. Like I just said Kali, 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 and he fucked off. It's so interesting. And the concept of sati, of a woman following her husband into the funeral pyre, that's also something we can discuss. Because then Holy Mother Sarada Devi, of course, she wasn't going to step into the fire. In one sense, she did with the Panchatattva. Think about that. That's a cool thought. But anyway, she didn't actually go into the fire to follow Sri Ramakrishna. She just like was taking her bangles off as a widower would. A widow doesn't wear her marriage bangles. And Sri Ramakrishna appeared in a vision, like Jesus appearing to Mary outside the tomb. And he's like, girl, what are you doing? Why are you taking off your marriage bangles? Have I died? I've only gone to the other room. The death of the body is not the death of the individual. And so why are you acting like a widow? You didn't lose your husband just because you lost your husband's body. He said, it's so interesting. Anyway, so Sri Ramakrishna is a Shakta, and he thinks of God as a woman. Necessarily then, his disciple, his foremost disciple, Swami Vivekananda, would also be a Shakta. And there are a few things that I want to point out here at the top of the lecture before we get into anything. The first thing is Swami Vivekananda's feminism and its relation to his sister. Because his sister's suicide was really important. It was a pivotal moment in Swami Vivekananda's approach, especially when it came to issues of gender and biological gender, grammatical gender, cultural gender, and spiritual gender. Like a lot of his views on those things became pronounced. Yes? Yes? Did somebody say something? Oh, hello? Was that a... Okay. Anyway, if you can raise your hand, then I can see you and then... Okay, yeah, no worries. So, Swami Vivekananda, his approach to gender, in all senses of that word, was, I think, really defined by the suicide of his sister, which is a really, really important point that I want to talk about, right? So let's start with Swami Vivekananda. Because I think, as far as feminism goes, it was Ariana, yes. We had a religious experience. It was the voice of Ariana Rishi. This whole lecture is... I dedicate this lecture to Phoenix Sangha, to Circle K, to the circle of Kali. You know, Roy was coming to pick me up at the airport with Kali Dasi, and they were like, we're circling the airport, where are you? And I'm like, well, I'm circling samsara like a vulture. But the first thing we have to do is we have to go to Circle K. Because in Phoenix, there's a place called Circle K, and I love it because K for Kali, and for other things that Phoenix is associated with. And then I go to Circle K, and I'm like, the circle of samsara, the circle of Kali, and every time I'm in Phoenix, the first thing I have to do is go and buy Black American Spirits at Circle K. So anyway, I dedicate this lecture to the circle of samsara that is Kali, to Circle K, and to the Phoenix Sangha, but also to Ariana Grande, the great Rishi. Rishika, actually. Oh, maybe I'll say that too. I'll talk a little bit about Ambrini's daughter and Vakdevi and the first Rishika to articulate non-duality. Oh, that's cool, actually. Yeah, that's a cool place we can also go in this lecture. Anyway, there's no lecture. I don't know what I'm going to say. I just have a lot of places to go, a lot of cool ideas to explore. And so just pace with me on this roof for a little while, and then we'll just see what happens. And should we fall off, we'll say, wee, crunch, crack. Jaima. Okay, so Swami Vivekananda was once asked, this is a very important thing, he was once asked about the issue of widow remarriage. Because like I was saying earlier, in India at this time, there's like a very important conversation around whether or not a woman who has lost her husband can remarry. Because the Brahmo Samaj and other Hindu reformers were very intent on granting women this right. So they were saying like women should not be deprived remarriage. Like, that's horrific, because for a woman who loses her husband, let's say she's like 16 or 17, and she loses her husband, she's not able to participate in the economy in any real way. I mean, she can make baskets and work on the paddy field or whatever, but she can't actually get a job and make her own income. And even in, like, Western liberal democracies, it's still the case that most women's clothing don't have pockets. You know what I mean? The concept of women possessing their own money is, like, really universally strange to most cultures in the world. Like that's interesting to note, because even Virginia Woolf in like the late 19th century has to say, for a woman to succeed, she needs money and a room of her own. Because you know what happens? This is actually a really good book. In the course of feminist studies, feminist studies, it's aged really well, right? Virginia Woolf's book, because she's like a Victorian English woman who's like an intellectual, and the book opens with a woman trying to think about stuff in like the gardens of a university. She uses the fictitious name Oxbridge just to refer to all the prestigious universities of the world, your Harvards and your Yales and your Oxfords and your Cambridge, where intelligent men have conversations about women. You know, almost all conversations about women are had by men, as it were, at least prominently. And so Virginia Woolf, she self-inserts, as it were, in this book as this thinker, this woman who's pacing or lying down in the garden in Oxbridge. And she's about to have a really great idea, right? She's about to think of something really awesome. And the moment she's about to articulate the thought, somebody comes and interrupts her. And she's like, this is why it's almost impossible for a woman to like follow through with their thinking and follow through with their actions. Because they're just not given the space to do it. Because of the cultural imposition of their role as caretaker. So if a woman has to take care of her children or her brothers, or she has to take care of her husband or her spouse, or like, if she has to be in the role of caretaker, right? That means that she might not have the leisure to just like wander about the gardens of Oxbridge and like think about stuff. And so anytime she's about to think about something cool, or anytime she's about to do something cool as a result of what she's thinking about, somebody will come and interrupt her. Like the child will cry, or the husband will shout for tea, or something nonsense like that. And so then she like can't do that because she has to go focus on this other thing, which means taking time away from her own pursuit, which has led to this kind of martyr complex that many mothers feel, where it's like they can't even take a bath. I work at a middle school, and I know a lot of mothers, and I like, you know, have conversations with them around their experience, and a lot of times they're saying like they feel guilty even taking a bath. Do you know? Like the concept of taking time for oneself, for like self-care or something like that in any way, shape or form, even as innocent as a bath, that feels like taking time away from their children, from their husbands, from their work, from all the things that demand so much of them. So it's almost like a woman in most cultures, not just Western liberal democracies or Eastern countries, it's like most women everywhere might be cultured or conditioned to feel like they are providers, that they have to help others, and their femininity is contingent upon that. So Virginia Woolf is like, she's pointing out that isn't it curious that men get a lot of privacy, like they have their studies, for instance, but in a Victorian English household, a woman might not have her own study to sit by herself. In fact, she might share the room with her children. The man might not. He might have a separate room, or at least a study, or at least he can go to Oxbridge and wander about the gardens, you know. But she might need to be with the children, or at least be with her other women in that society. And even in Indian context, you see like women are often together and stuff, and that's really cool. But being alone might be difficult for a woman. A woman is not necessarily allowed to be alone. Maybe because culture is like, you know, they put them in like the Purdah system in the Mughal Empire. We can talk about that too. A woman is put behind this curtain, as it were. Like she's a kept woman, a hidden woman. Or if she acts out, she's put in a mental institute, like Fitzgerald's wife or something, you know. Wow, I just realized like how much of Shaktism is just an obsession with like the experience of being a woman throughout history, and I'm realizing there's so much to talk about even in Victorian English feminism. I'm like, oh yeah, Fitzgerald's wife. Like, whoa, there's a really cool conversation about hysteria here, about a woman expressing her feeling in society, being afraid of like nature's expression and wanting to put them in the... I'm just like, wow, you guys, how on earth are we going to have this discussion? There's just so much. It's just so cool. It just like spans the whole depth and breadth of my like intellectual life. Anyway, coming back to this, Fitzgerald, his wife, is put in the institutions. Like what that's, you notice like a woman is very rarely allowed to be alone. Gwen Stefani in her I'm Just a Girl. I almost sang I'm just a girl and life is a nightmare. Whoops. The Simple Plan Gwen Stefani mix up. I gotta go the fuck to bed. But Gwen Stefani's song, Just a Girl, right? Like she's like talking about how she can't walk on the streets alone, and that sucks. It sucks that a woman, like her experience in the world is so unsafe that she's not allowed to be by herself, and that's problematic. So Virginia Woolf points out in A Room of One's Own, she points out that a woman must have privacy in order to be able to think thoughts, in order to be able to succeed in life on her own terms. So she needs a room of her own. That's one of the two conditions. She needs privacy, she needs space. She needs leisure, which a lot of men have and a lot of women don't. Or at least a lot of women might feel guilty about having leisure because it takes them away from their cultural role of provider, which never seems to end, by the way. You're always providing all the time. Yeah. That's why I like the idea of Kali as like an absent mother. I'll get to this later. I'll be like, anyway, I'm gonna reject motherhood if you don't mind. I think it's gonna be exciting. I'm gonna try to free Kali of her role of mother. if it makes sense. Like Sonu said something really beautiful in her poem. That was so cool, by the way, you guys. I was like on the flight and I was just like writing this like satanic poetry or whatever. I was excited about it, like the concept of Lucifer. I'm like Icarus is the lesson of Icarus is not don't fly at the sun. I'm going to try to invert that lesson. I'm going to say, I am that Icarus who jumps towards the sun, and when my wings are scorched, I will fall to the earth, and I will blacken the earth with my blasphemy. Like, my idea was kind of like inversions of beings like Icarus and Lucifer. Anyway, so I wrote that poem, and then everyone just like went into a poetry store, and I'm like, yes, you understood the assignment. It was awesome. Like, can we read some of those today? Like, I just want to read, like, I want to hear Virana this poem and just like fuck, it was just so good. Those poems were so good. Anyway, I really like the poem that Sonu, that sentiment in Sonu's poem of just like, let's just stop calling her mother. Leave her the fuck alone. Like, why are we just so like we're children pulling at her hamstrings? You can't even take a bath. Let's prepare her bath and say, I'm Shiva. Actually, I'm good. And so let me just like, give you a dance floor. Instead of asking you to give me a dance party, let me be the dance floor so you can party, Ma. Like freeing Ma of her cultural role of nurturer is like a point that I want to make today, a political point. Because oftentimes I'm at dinner with one of the moms at my PTA and like I'm like, girl, get out of here. Go and sign up to the for the pottery class or whatever that you feel like you don't have time for. Like fuck the children, like they'll be fine, let nature swallow them up, it's not your problem. Like just just go and live your life, because culture will tell you that you cannot. So do the thing, girl, no matter what it does, who it harms. I just like wish that women like men would have that boldness to assert themselves and follow their own swadharma, even when it came at the cost of others. Because often it doesn't, actually. When you do your swadharma, it's for the best for everyone, even if you can't see it in that moment. Anyway, oh my god, I can't start with that because then I'm going to get really emotional and get into it. But like, I'm going to leave that at the end. I have a big rant for like trying to allow a woman to reclaim her freedom, which I think are subtle narratives about God as mother, not as God as woman, but God as mother, can sometimes in this socio-political landscape condition a woman away from. You know, a woman might subtly feel like what it means to be a woman is to be a mother. She might then realize, oh, then I have to nurture and care for everybody. What it means to be a woman can include being a mother, but it should not be confined to being a mother. That's why in the Shakta philosophy, God is woman doesn't just mean God is mother. And even if you say God is mother, and Ramakrishna very much did, what kind of mother? Let me say a crazy, drunk, ecstatic mother who knows that her child can take care of herself and who almost demands that her child take care of herself, lest she infantilize the child. Then I'm going to go to the Garden of Eden and I'm going to say what kind of Kali you all want is the demiurge. What kind of Kali I want is the serpent. I want Kundalini. I don't want that Kali which keeps me a child in a safe garden. I want that Kali that throws me from the garden or that blackens my wings as I jump towards the sun. I want a Kali that helps me fall. And then as I fall off the roof in Phoenix, intoxicated and unslept, I'll say, wee. Yeah, so I'm going to try to there's some things here that are very important to me. In thinking of Shaktism in the modern context, I want to move it away from motherhood. I want to move it away from, anyway, let's start with this, Vivekananda. So coming back to Fitzgerald and his wife and the Victorian English experience, like Virginia Woolf points out that women don't have privacy, often because of their role of nurturer or caretaker or whatever, right? So if a woman were to have a room of her own, that would be great. But that's not enough. Like men have privacy, but men also have one more thing. And this is using men and women in a very gender binary kind of way. Like in Victorian England, it was like, we hadn't really gone in deep into that discussion either. But a man, in most cultures, not only has a room of their own, or space of their own, but they also have money. That's important. Like, financial means allows a man much more, mobility in the world. So even if a woman had privacy, she might not have her own money to buy books, to, read in that private time. She might not have money to, travel in order to explore and experience new places. And if she goes there, they will insist that she go with her friends at least, not by herself, because of the unsafe reality of being a woman in the world. So having said all of that, Virginia Devi, she then points out, look, you need money too. So money in a room of one's own. This is what a woman needs to succeed. So the book is called A Room of One's Own. It's a Virginia Woolf book. And I really like that book. Oh, at the World Championships, the World Debating Championships in 2015, it was really cute. There was a team from Sydney, I think. And, no, it was a team from Harvard. And I remember, Bo, a friend of mine who debates at Harvard, he opened his... Was it Bo or was it... Either it was Team Sydney or Team Harvard. It was one of those teams. I was watching the debate. It was the semifinals or something. And it was so cute because the topic was about creating economic zones that are exclusively run by women. So there will be parts in your city where all the businesses in that city must be female owned. Right? And that like taxes and all would be adjusted. Like, basically kind of creating an autonomous zone within mostly patriarchal communities run exclusively by women. Like, can you create matriarchal spaces even within patriarchal economic and sociological landscapes? Right? That was the debate. And it was so cute because the opening line, I think it was Team Sydney or one of the Harvard teams, I forget, like, the opening line was, Virginia Woolf once said, this was his legit opening line. It was great. It was so good. He said, Virginia Woolf once pointed out that a woman needs money and a room of her own to succeed. We from Team Harvard Opening Government believe, fuck the room, let's give her a city. I thought it was fucking good. What a great opening line. It was such a mic drop opening line. Anyway, so a woman needs time. She needs space. She needs privacy. But she also needs money. That was Virginia Woolf's point. This is quite a stretch. No, it really isn't. But do you remember the movie Before Midnight? It's kind of niche reference, but there's one of my favorite series of films ever, and if you have any Taurus or Libra placements, if you're Venus ruled in any way, shape or form, you're gonna love these films, so thank me later. Obviously you know Before Sunrise, right? It's like Richard Linklater. You gotta see it, you guys. What the fuck are you doing? Like, these films are like films of romance, and there's so many of them that I like, but in this film, it's like a drama. It's like Ethan Hawke meets Julian Despy or whatever, and she is like this girl on a train, and he like chats her up, and the two of them get off in Austria, I believe, and they just have a day together in Austria. I mean, how romantic, just strangers on a train. And trains are so incredibly romantic and poetic and important. So the strangers on a train meet, and they decide to spend a day together in Austria. And there's something about being strangers that allows for more intimacy than anything. Like, once you get to know somebody, it sucks already, because then you project all your expectations on them. Once you start to transact, once you think you have something to gain and something to lose, that is the death of romance. The death of love and the death of romance is needing things, right? More importantly, it's needing things of others. Romance is an expression of freedom. It's an expression, not an attempt to take. And all expression, unlike taking, is not a barter, it's not a trade, it's not a transaction. All expression is giving. So romance is about giving. It's not the sacrifice that consumes, it's a sacrifice that enlivens. So these two characters, they're strangers, right? So they don't really have anything to gain or lose from each other, except the fact that they're like attracted to one another. So they get off the train and they have this beautiful, like, just adventure through Austria throughout the day and throughout the night. The thing is, though, when sunrise comes about, they have to get on, like, they have to part ways. So they just have a date until sunrise comes up, except they realize that they're actually like horrifically in love with one another. They fall madly in love with one another, and now as sunrise approaches, it's like that Eagle Eye Sherry song, save tonight, tomorrow I'll be gone. It's such a cute song. Like yesterday, after staying up for 2 days, it was like Sunday night, and I had to leave 6 a.m. Monday morning, right? And I'm like sitting next to Shrija Devi, and I'm like falling asleep. And I'm like, wait, fuck! Like, we only have like 3 hours left together. Like, why would I sleep for these 3 hours? You know? And it's like this feeling of like fighting sleep just at that final moment so we can like just live together for them. And there's like that Eagle Eye Sherry song idea of like, save tonight, tomorrow I'll be gone. Come tomorrow, let's fight the break of dawn, as it were. It's like a defiance of death. And so they're like, dawn is approaching, and they're like getting more and more in love as they have this wonderful adventure through the city. And it's beautiful because a lot of the movie is dialogue driven. So it's a psychodrama, because as they're wandering about this beautiful European city, this American and this French woman are like culturally exchanging ideas and their life stories, and they're just like in their own psychological sphere together. And that's what a conversation is. You enter a shared universe. You are a universe. In fact, you are a multiverse. Within your mind, there are entire universes, so many Brahmandas containing so many realms of reality, all within you. And arguably someone else is that too. So it's like a multiverse meeting a multiverse for a moment. It creates this liminal space where these two universes collide, and it's nuclear fusion, it's explosive, it's apocalyptic in the revelatory sense. And in this moment, two beings are coming together and creating a third thing, a mysterious point of reconciliation where the duality of one person and another person, that dyad, becomes a unitary being. And so, like, we know in the tantric world that conversations and sex are interchangeable. Like, the word vaktra can mean both the yoni and the mouth. Yogini vaktra is code for the mouth of the yogini and the yoni of the yogini, because both organs ejaculate. And ejaculate here means express, articulate. Uvacha. Vach, right? Like vak. So this idea of uchara, or like some kind of articulation, is both sexual and linguistic and verbal. So here, what's beautiful about the movie is you realize that romance, like, it's not even important that they make love in the end, and we don't even know if they do. That's my favorite thing. And in the second movie, in the sequel, there's a whole conversation about whether or not they did, which I think is so beautiful because it decenters the role of actual sexual union without like negating it. It allows for it, but decenters it. And it says like this conversation that we had, that was the romance. And so throughout the whole movie, it's a romance of universes colliding, cultures colliding, and people discovering in that liminality something universal that goes beyond their individual experiences as an American man or a European woman or French woman. And they're having this conversation in a neutral city, as it were, Austria. And it's so cute. It's so cute because, you know, he's a Scorpio. Like, actually, Ethan Hawke is a Scorpio. And she's a Sagittarius. And it's really cute because it's like fire and water almost. They're very, very good archetypes of those two sun signs, actually. They probably have a lot of placements in those. I don't actually know, but they're good. He's a good Scorpio, she's a good Sagittarius. It's like this wonderful romance between two very different people. So it's not only that they're man and woman, it's more important that they're very different people. And so two different strangers spend the whole day and the whole night together, and they're fighting the break of dawn, a la Eagle Eye Sherry or whatever. So at the end of the movie, they agree to meet again at the same time, in the same place next year, or something like that. And so there's a sequel called Before Sunset? Yeah, thank you. It's Before Sunset, where they, you know, meet in France, where he's doing a book tour or something, and they meet. And then there's another movie called Before Midnight. And those three movies are so special because they take us through different stages of a romantic relationship. And in Before Midnight, the issue at hand is parenting and motherhood and navigating work in the face of the needs of your family. And so she plays the role of like an activist who believes in some causes and wants to fight for them. But she's also a mother and she's also a wife. And she's in love with her husband, who is a writer. But, and I'm just going to say, like, the Before Midnight movie, the third movie in this series, the Before Sunrise, Before whatever. I don't actually know what the trilogy is called, but it's a Richard Linklater trilogy. But in the third film, there's this beautiful discussion that happens at the end, kind of like the climax of the movie. It actually might be my favorite of the three. Of course, Before Sunrise, all three are great. And I watch them again and again, especially when I'm heartbroken. Like, whenever I, like, break up or something, I'm just, like, eating ice cream watching these films, probably. These are, like, my go-to... These are my go-to falling into love films and my go-to breaking up films. And usually, when I'm dating people, like, I will always insist that we watch these films. It's, like, my favorite. Like, they're awesome. Anyway, I think at this point, Before Midnight might be my favorite and the most relevant to today's discussion. Because what happens there is, at the end, they have a discussion about their lives and what motherhood has meant to this woman who wants to, like, articulate her own career. And she just feels like Ethan Hawke's character, just has the time to do his dream, but she doesn't have the same time. Like, and she points this out. She's like, oh, during our Greek retreat, every morning for 2 hours, you just wander about and you get all this time to think, but I'm making salad, which you eat like a pig or something like that. So her claim is that she could think really great thoughts, but she doesn't have the space like he does to think those great thoughts. And more importantly, if she were to pursue her career at the expense of her children and husband, she would be demonized for it by society, whereas he is lionized for it. You know, there's this beautiful moment where they're at the counter of the hotel. This means a lot to me, actually, this moment, because this happened to me and it's caused so much, like, problems in my relationships often throughout my life. This moment, like, really struck a chord. So he's at the counter and he's a writer, a celebrated writer. And then there's a hotel person, you know, who's at the counter. And he says, oh my God, I really love your books. Can you please sign the Greek version of this book? And she hands him this book to sign. So he does it. Then this hotel person looks to his wife and says, can you also sign it? Because aren't you the woman in the book? And she's upset about that. She's like, wait, why would I sign it? I didn't write the book. Also, you want me to sign it just because of the character in the book, which you think is me? This is really important. That woman and her relationship to the hotel people is based on Ethan Hawke's character's depiction of her. And so she's celebrated just as a muse here. You know, it's interesting. Like, her individual achievements don't really matter. His achievement matters. But more importantly, his presentation of her gives her value and gives her meaning. So she should sign the book because she's in the book. But is she? She didn't write the book, and she exists in the book as the conception of a man. So she's almost like upset by this. She wants to be freed from being celebrated for something that she isn't. And that's what happens to women a lot. We celebrate them for being muses, but we don't celebrate the muse that moves them. And we don't even allow them the space to be moved by the muse or the ability to enact the will of that muse. Isn't that beautiful? Women as muses can also sometimes take away women's music. So that scene, like, really strikes a chord. Because it would happen, like, I'd be outside or whatever, and someone would recognize me from the internet, and they'd be, like, excited to meet me, right? And then Vijaya or somebody like that would be relegated to the role of, like, my partner or, like, my wife or something. And I've heard people say to her, often with good intentions, oh, he couldn't do what he does without you. Which actually puts a lot of pressure on her, doesn't it? Like, when we host, like, pujas or something, she, like, cooks for everybody, and then people will say, oh my God, we wouldn't be able to host pujas if you didn't cook in the kitchen. Like, yes, that's to some extent true, but it's a horrible thing to say. I mean, of course, it's coming from a good place, but it says like, oh, your role is to cook food for everyone, which I actually didn't like that she was doing. I was like, girl, like we should just host dinner parties and then you can cook elaborate meals if you like to do that. But let's just make a pot of khichdi or order pizza or something, just so that you're free to be in the puja. But she liked to cook. She really enjoyed cooking for everyone at the puja. And she would be told by people like, oh, he wouldn't be able to do it if you didn't cook. Or if you didn't play your role of supporting him in giving retreats and going to lectures and stuff, like then he wouldn't be able to do it. Which meant she felt like she had to come with me on every retreat. If I would go to Atlanta, she would come to Atlanta. If I would go to like Denver, she would come to Denver. But that's problematic because unless she wanted to go to those places, why would she go to those places? And for a long time, we both thought that she wanted to go. But then it became clear that she felt like she had to. So in her individual experience, wanting to go and feeling that she should became conflated. There were times when she didn't actually want to go to a retreat. She would much rather stay home and paint. But on some level, she felt like she should because she'd been told by everybody that if she didn't, I would die. So what if I died? It's more important that she paints. Do you know what I mean? Like, the moment she became my wife, this is so interesting. Our marriage ruined our relationship, as it were. Because the moment she became my wife, and the moment I became more and more, like, involved in the world that I was in, the more and more that world consumed her. Especially in her role as a woman and wife, she was often projected upon, mostly by Indian communities, as the Shakti. But Shakti here not as a wild, free, dynamic agent that is supported by a husband, but Shakti as in that wife who supports her husband, which is a total inversion of Shakta philosophy. And that shit crept up on us, you guys. It crept up on us every time we were at the movie theater in Century City and someone would come up to me and be like, bro, love your stuff on the internet. Like, it doesn't happen often enough, but every time it happened, she would just kind of stand there, right? And they would like talk to me excitedly for 15 or 20 minutes, and I would often humor like long conversations, you know, and that was my bad. Like, I should have noticed that like it's not about her, it's about me. And in that self-indulgent moment where I'm enjoying being recognized for my work on the internet or whatever, like her only role in that is as like support or something. You know, and I notice like very rarely would people engage her in the conversation, except in this way that would never work in the Bechdel system. You know, like we were not passing the Bechdel test, you guys, because like in every one of these retreats, I was like the center of attention, and she was only by proxy valuable or by association valuable. It's a really interesting thing to point out, you know? It's like if people complimented her art, it was often because they were excited to like talk to me or something. Like that crept up on us. It created resentment, and it should have, because without that, then she wouldn't have like pursued her own life, you know? And I, as a man in the marriage, didn't understand to what extent that my life and the freedom that I enjoyed in my life as a man would consume her, because I always thought like she had that freedom too. But it's a subtle thing. It's a deeply embedded psychological current, maybe, that neither of us were able to notice. She wasn't able to notice it in time to fight for it, and I wasn't able to notice it in time to fight for it. It just kind of, again, crept up on us. And so that's why that scene in Before Midnight really struck a chord with me. Because that same thing has happened to me so many times and is only increasingly happening to me. Where like the women in my life, especially those closest to me, are relegated to roles of support. You know? It's really interesting. Anyway, so in Before Midnight, this issue is highlighted. And the issue is, why is it that when I want to pursue my career, the woman says, it's demonized. When you take 2 hours to walk around and think and write your books, it's celebrated. Do you know? And there are beautiful conversations about monogamy also in that movie, and the institution of marriage allowing for exploration and freedom, and whether a woman or a man has more ability to do that. It's like just really beautiful. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I'm about to fall off the roof now. I've paced too close to the edge. It's like I have a central topic, and then the further I pace away from the central topic, the closer I get to the edge of the roof, and the closer I get to derailing the whole lecture and falling off and eating shit, which I don't mind. But I've walked quite a far afield from the center of the question, what is a woman? But why am I bringing up the Richard Linklater stuff? Waking Life is also pretty good. I love all these dialogue-driven films. But anyway, money and a room of one's own. Right? There's Virginia Woolf, and she's articulating this point that a woman needs space and time, and often she's deprived that because of the narratives around what it means to be a mother. You know, so coming back to the issue at hand then, defining what a woman is really important, because it can politically and culturally and sociologically influence the scope of freedom that a woman has. So thinking of Gwen Stefani's complaint in Just a Girl, thinking of Virginia Woolf's complaint, thinking of Fitzgerald's wife. We can even talk about Mulan later. There's just like a lot to explore here in literary feminism in all of its waves, right? But coming back to this, I think Shakta philosophy has a unique opportunity to add, like, it has a unique contribution to add to this discussion, which I think thus far we haven't really considered. And that's what the point of this lecture is about. I just want to talk about what a woman is from a Shakta point of view, which means not from my experience. Like, I have no authority to speak about what it is to be a woman culturally, because I don't have the cultural experience of women, or even biologically, because I have male genitals. So, like, I can't then biologically or culturally weigh in on the discussion. But I think spiritually I might have something to say, because spiritually we can refer to the Shastras, we can refer to philosophy, which are not rooted, like I said earlier, in biology or culture, but which have its effects in biology and culture. So Swami Vivekananda is a very important example here, because he's a man, but unlike other men, he has this very wonderful approach to feminism, and it's way ahead of its time. So I'll point this out. Sri Ramakrishna was a Shakta, his foremost disciple was a Shakta, and then now there's an issue of widow remarriage. Many of the men in the context of like 1800s India were reformers, and they were arguing that women should be able to remarry. The Hindu orthodoxy were saying, because of Mughal ideas and whatnot, that a woman should not be able to remarry. Again, the conversation about like what a woman should do is something that men are having and legislating. So what a woman can or cannot do is decided by what men think a woman should or should not do, right? So that's itself problematic. But weirdly enough, nobody notices that until Vivekananda. So they approach Vivekananda, one of the most relevant cultural voices of his time, the spokesperson of all India at that time, if you will, and they ask him about his views on widow remarriage. Like, is he like the Brahmo Samaj reformers? Is he pro-widow remarriage? Or is he like the Hindu orthodoxy against widow remarriage? Like, what is his stance on widow remarriage? And his answer is stunning. Stunning in its simplicity and obviousness. That's what genius is, by the way. Genius is when you can point to something that's simple and obvious that everyone else seems to be missing. And so Swamiji says, in response to this question, what are your views on widow remarriage? He says, why don't you go and ask women, and what they tell you to do, you do that. In other words, he's saying the role of the masculine here politically is to listen and receive the role of the feminine. And by the way, within the group of women, there's going to be disagreement. You can't say that all women are pro-choice or all women are pro-widow remarriage. Many women were against widow remarriage at that time, being members of the Hindu orthodoxy. And many women are pro-lifers. Like, is a pro-choice a manifestly feminist idea? Well, if a woman expresses pro-life, it would be manifestly feminist to listen to her. And then, like, let women sort it out amongst themselves. And in Malayali communities, like in the communities that I grew up in, it's less so now, but in the villages, you'll find they're more matriarchal. And so, like, when a woman is on her menstruation or something, there's like a room that she goes to, and she's tended to only by other women, and only women have authority in those rooms. There are places in the temple that men cannot go. So there are women-only spaces run by women, and those societies are usually, they tend to be matriarchal. And remember, Kerala has the most ancient Kali temple in the world. Grasini Devi was asking, what's the oldest Kali art? I would argue it's the oldest Kali temple. It's an architectural thing, and it's like it was in Kerala, right? Bengal and Kerala have been often very strongly matriarchal places. They've also been places of great intellectual flourishing. You'll find that in India, wherever the woman is revered, and by that meaning not celebrated as a mother and forced into the kitchen and told that she can support her husband who just goes around and talks bullshit on stages all the time. You know, like it's like when a woman is revered, meaning when she's given fucking space to do what the fuck she wants without the tyranny of morality or cultural conditioning or the tyranny of a weeping baby. Like that is how we revere women. And in those places where women were revered in this way, party time. You had intellectual flourishing, you had economic flourishing. The world is always made better when women are revered. And the way to revere a woman is just to allow her to be what she wants to be without telling her what she should be, legislation-wise or intellectually. You know, so like what happened with Vivekananda is important because the same thing is reminiscent of feminism in the pro-life, pro-choice discussions. It's like what a woman chooses to do with her body is a woman's discussion. So even if women decide that legislatively you should not have the right to abort your child, that should be a woman's choice. Like, no man should be able to say, oh, like, I who have never carried a child am now going to lock all women into, like, giving birth to the heirs. Do you know? Or I'm going to, like, open the door for all women to, like... But arguably, from the Shakta point of view, that which empowers freedom is always better. So a legislation that allows for the most choice is always better. So in some sense, we're always going to be leaning pro-choice. Not to say that we might agree... Like, I'm not going to weigh in here. I'm not going to tell you what my view is. I'm just saying, like, from the Shakta theological point of view, it's like a woman should be able to choose. But it's a choice that a woman alone should be able to make. Do you know, so if she decides to keep the baby, she decides to get rid of the baby, like that's not a legislative question. It's a question of personal feminine sovereignty. And Swamiji might have been the first person in history to articulate that. Go and ask the women what they want, and then do that. Duh! And we still can't follow his advice. Right? So then the next thing that I want to point out is Swamiji's relationship to his sister. So Swamiji had a younger sister. And oh my God, like how much we wept yesterday. It was so beautiful, you know, like most of Sunday was just this wonderful discussion that we were having in Phoenix, you know? And we were just thinking of Swamiji, and I was saying to Srija, I was like, I am so sorry. Like, a lot of that was just me apologizing for India, because, you know, like, anyway, it was complex. I don't want to get into it. But I am getting into it in one sense. But I remember saying, like, I'm sure on some level, we Indian men, we all carry with us. This is what I was trying to articulate. I was trying to articulate, like, an Indian woman has to apologize for being a woman. But often what it means to be a good woman in Indian society is not the Vedic ideal. It's the ideal of the rishis, filtered through 700 years of Mughal occupation and the British Raj. Which means what it means to be a woman is not an ancient ideal that's been upheld throughout culture. It's an ideal that's been obfuscated by hundreds of years of tyranny, colonization, and losing one's own sense of national identity, right? So there's a sense in which Indian men are shamed or guilty by the narrative that they are a conquered race. And in their shame and in their guilt, they suppress and fail to revere the woman. Only Shiva can worship Parvati, but men stopped being Shiva, as it were. I'm speaking culturally and sociologically. I do mean to take this discussion to a deeper place. I'm just like spitballing for a bit. But then, arguably, it's like Vivekananda is like the greatest Shiva, as it were, that India has ever produced. Can you imagine his guilt and his heartbreak when his own sister kills herself because of those oppressive cultural forces that all women are subjected to in India? My great-grandmother killed herself for the same reasons, because she was forced into arranged marriage that she didn't want to be in. But like all the women in my Malayali side, who are Shaktas through and through, they would rather death than live a life that was not theirs. For her, give me death or give me liberty. She accepted no other option. So rather than being forced into arranged marriage, this lioness of a woman just like killed herself. She's one of the heroes in my family. I really appreciate her. One of my great-grandfathers was decapitated in the context of Kali Puja, and another one of my women in our family just killed herself rather than be forced into arranged marriage she didn't like. But many women are forced in this position. It's a terrible thing. But Swamiji's own sister killed herself, and that made such a big impression on him. And then from that point on, he became intensely Shakta in a political sense also, advocating for women in very political ways. For example, the second example, beside this response that he gave to the Hindu reformers around widow remarriage, the second example here is about the issue of convents. So Swamiji founded the Ramakrishna Mutt. So in the Ramakrishna mission, Belur Mutt is like the headquarters of the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission, but it's a monastery. So everyone there are monastics, male monastics, run by male monastic leaders. Like the president Maharaj is a man, and everyone is a man. It's like male only, right? It's not a co-ed space. So then what about a convent? Notice in Christianity and in Buddhism, there are convents, spaces where women can be monastics also. They can be nuns. But notice in every other cultural context, it is the monastery that runs the convent. So think of Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Clare, like they're starting their own order. And it was a co-ed space because Clare was hanging out with St. Francis. Even Jesus's community was a co-ed space. There was Mary, there was Peter and whatnot, right? But then once we started institutionalizing monasticism, there were monasteries and convents, and they are not co-ed spaces. And even if they were, the convent was usually under the rule of the monastery. So it's the abbots who make decisions about the nuns. Again, men are deciding what women do, right? So Swamiji felt like that's kind of weird. Shouldn't we have a convent run entirely by women? And it was like the first of its kind, as it were. So the Sarada Mutt, the convent for the women in the Ramakrishna mission, is structurally different from Belur Mutt. They're two different organizations with two different bodies of authority. And one is run by women and one is run by men. And they have very different ideas as to how to be followers of Ramakrishna. I mean, it's so simple, it's so obvious. But these are very political moments. Swami Vivekananda said, my politics are truth and God, all other things are trash. Like that Swamiji, and Jesus, who never really wanted to involve himself in the actual politics of his time, and Plato, who felt that politics was a degenerate thing to do, that real intellectuals should educate, not vote. Or not participate in that thing called voting, which is really just, the Koch brothers paying lots of money to super PACs and starting 501c4s and using, the illusion of your democracy. Oh, Americans, such a young nation. Anyway, so talking about all of this is important because Swamiji, although he didn't want to be political, although Jesus wasn't political, although Plato wasn't political, their spirituality filtered through culture and gender and biology and society. And you saw what happened is these moments. And I think a lot of that was influenced by Swamiji, reflecting on his sister's suicide. It's a tragedy in his life, the loss of his sister, and you can see how it shaped his intellectual being. So I was talking to Shrija yesterday and thinking about that. I'm just apologizing to her for all the Indian men who failed to live up to that ability to give women the most space possible. And I'm in one context, just speaking on behalf of all men in India, I was you had to kill yourself in a previous life because they told you couldn't wear jasmine in your hair or something like that, right? And I'm I'm going to try to do better in this one. As a big brother, let me try to do better. So that like a sister doesn't have to kill herself. Even like how can a Shakta big brother like not fight to the death to create a world where a woman can do whatever she wants? And that's not the world that India lives in now. It's not the world that many women live in now. And so having said all of that, Swamiji is important here because he had these very manifestly feminist ideas, and of course he would, given that he's a Shakta. And it's important that as a Shakta, his guru was a Shakta. So now we can get into the lecture proper. Now we can get into maybe some more philosophical and spiritual material. This is just all preamble, just to see why there's so many stakes here in this conversation and why its effects filter through political, biological, and sociological spheres. But I'm going to move away from those spheres and like just take you to a more shastric, more tantric-oriented conversation around femininity, which necessarily must start with Sankhya, because almost all of Tantric philosophy is based on this Purusha Prakriti dyad. Notice, there's a series of dyads, and the masculine-feminine dyad, if you want to think of it either as a binary or either as a spectrum, you can still think of it as a dyad. So they could be ends of a spectrum or points of a spectrum, or they could be an actual binary, and if you want to get rid of the spectrum idea, you can, but you cannot get rid of the idea of a dyad. There's a masculine and there's a feminine pole, either as part of the spectrum or as a binary, and this dyad, notice, is very much like the dyad of transcendence and immanence. So I'm going to relate now femininity and masculinity to two other ideas, transcendence and immanence. Then I'm going to relate those to another dyad, and this is the dyad of stillness and movement, or rather the unchanging and the changing. The non-dynamic, or otherwise the static, otherwise known as the static, and the dynamic. Is that fair? So the dynamic and the non-dynamic, the static and the dynamic, I'm just going to use these things interchangeably, but I'm also going to say dynamic and non-dynamic is interchangeable with immanence and transcendence, which I'm going to say is interchangeable with feminine and masculine. Now another dyad, spirit and matter, or rather God and the world. So God is often conceived of as that transcendent, static, unchanging reality, whereas the world or matter is thought of as that dynamic, changing reality. And so if you say masculine is the transcendent, unchanging reality, then the masculine is God, right? The feminine, if you say it's the immanent, if it's the changing, the dynamic, then you're saying the feminine is the world, the feminine is the body, the feminine is matter, the feminine is woman. In fact, the word matter also comes from like mater, mother, right? So the matrix, matrika. So the matrix of time and space, matrika, is called mother. Hence, we say matter. And if matter doesn't matter, then you're a transcendentalist, and likely your conception of God is masculine. But notice, once I do this, you guys, notice how sophisticated this dyad is. Because if I say the world is feminine, then everything in the world is of the world, and therefore everything in the world is feminine. So to the point that Eshama was making earlier, it's like, it's a kind of feminist non-duality to say everything within the world must be feminine, because the world itself is feminine. So what this dyad does is it takes the discussion of masculinity and femininity outside of the world. It's so interesting because no longer is it a discussion about biology. Notice, biology happens within the world. It's laukika. My discussion now is alaukika. Do you see why this is a brilliant stroke? It decenters the biological, political, and sociological feminism in favor of a spiritual feminism, right? But it totally argues for a higher order of masculinity and femininity than that which is articulated in the world. That's why when people say divine masculine, divine feminine, arguably when they use the word divine masculine, divine feminine, they're saying alaukika, right? The Sanskrit word alaukika means some transcendent ideal of masculine and feminine. But that's not actually how they use that word, because then they just reify cultural constructs which they say is feminine. So they say divine masculine. A lot of times in the modern new age, it's just some dude who's using that word to like justify like some kind of toxic masculinity or something. He's like saying, oh, it's okay that I am this way because it's the divine masculine. But what he means by masculine is still filtered through, whether rightly or wrongly, cultural and biological frameworks. And the same thing with women. A lot of women say, I have a right to talk about Shaktism more than you. I don't need to learn your Sanskrit. I don't need to interact with your Shastras. I can just speak on Shaktism because I am Shakti, because I'm a woman. This is fine and fair. And in the name of feminism, like, we should support it. But wait, you're still using feminism with regards to the body. Are you a woman just because you have a body? How dare you say such a thing? To all the women who identify as women who don't have yonis and who don't have breasts, you think that just because you have a breast and yoni, you are uniquely a woman? Is womanhood so cheap that a body is all you need to be one? I'm not decentering the body. I'm just trying to recenter some other things also. So we say, like, no, even if you say divine masculine, divine feminine, often you're just talking about genitals, or you're just talking about cultural and gender roles. Like, my experience in the world.
Well done.
Hi, Becca. Hi. Oh, were you gonna add something to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was unmuted. I was
Oh,
talking
no,
to my
no.
kid.
It's no problem. Again, it's not a lecture. It's just a discussion. So never feel bad. If you guys want to say something, by the way, and you say something, like, I'm gonna like listen to it. So like, don't be like shy or anything. But yeah. So anyway, cool. So hi, Becca. Welcome. But okay, this is important though, because notice when I say divine masculine, divine feminine, it's often without the nuance of that word divine. Alaukika. Often it's just using the word divine, but again, it's not right or wrong, it's just under nuanced. Using the word divine to justify something that's laukika, actually, that has to do with gender or cultural conditioning. So then I'm referring to my experience in the world as a woman, defined by what the world calls a woman, which could be genitals or not, but often it's sociological roles and functions. So woman as caretaker or whatever, I don't know. Like, it's going to be different from culture to culture. Not by that much, but more or less you can make this point. So if I say then, I'm championing the divine masculine, and if I say I'm championing the divine feminine, I must first define what I mean by divine, and people don't do that often. So that's why in the new age spaces, when you find this word divine feminine, divine masculine, you can kind of laugh at it. It's kind of laughable actually in many contexts because it's kind of cheap. It's just kind of like apologizing for behaviors that we don't think are up for debate just because of our cultural experience, which notice is a way to co-opt conversations around identity politics to reify one's bad behavior, as it were, using new age spiritual bypassing, if you will. So I think that's why the word divine masculine, divine feminine, at a certain point of our history, was very fashionable. But I think now on the internet, as we're exposed to more and more like consumer capitalist, like new age projects of selling you workshops, in the name of defending the divine feminine, the divine masculine, enlightened masculinity, etc., it's becoming kind of cartoonish because the words are losing their meaning. Like the word love. It's become so consumer capitalist, like because of Valentine's Day and selling roses and things like that it's cartoonish, right? So we laugh at it. So I'm going to use the words divine masculine, divine feminine, but I want to bring some nuance to this by appealing to Sankhya. And in the Sankhyan worldview, that which is immanent, that which is changing, that which is dynamic, that which is embodied, that which is in matter is considered to be prakriti. Whether or not you consider prakriti gendered in a biological or sociological sense, you have to at least admit that prakriti is gendered in a grammatical sense, which of course will matter in a biological and sociological context, because the grammatical gender can sometimes influence how we articulate those ideas in those other spheres that I just mentioned. So okay, having said this is important. In prakriti, the concept of prakriti, biology exists and sociology exists. So if prakriti is considered to be a woman, or at least linguistically and grammatically a woman, then everything within prakriti is a woman, you see. So gender is now not a question of genitals, nor is it a question of sociology. It's a question of philosophy and spirituality. It's a question of theology. Right? This is very important. This is how you decenter those things in a spiritual conversation about gender. This is a huge thing to say. I hope you can appreciate this point. Like when we're talking about divine masculine, divine feminine, we're talking about something very different from what most people are talking about when they refer to those words masculine and feminine. Because most of the time, the discussions that people are having, I don't mind saying this again and again and again, it's so important. Most of the time, the conversations that people are having about masculine and femininity are conversations within Prakriti, which are still valuable. Right? I'm not saying they're less valuable. They're still valuable. It's just that we have to appreciate now the conversation that we're going to have is slightly different because it's in a different sphere or field of discussion. Yes? So we'll start with this. Prakriti, in the Sankhyan system, which is one of the most primordial theological and philosophical models of India, you'll find that in this system, Prakriti, which is a feminine noun, refers to the changing, immanent, dynamic world of matter. Another way to say this is that Prakriti refers to the scene, the objects, that which you can experience. So not to objectify. The object here means that which is presented to you as part of your experience. Yes, so like if I see a table, the table is Prakriti. If I see a cow, the cow is Prakriti. Whether or not the cow is a male cow or a female cow. That's why when I say les poissons, in French, the word les is grammatical gender. The fish is masculine with regards to grammatical gender, but it still might be biologically a male fish. Or if fishes had societies, maybe there are gender roles attributed to the male fish that are different from the gender roles attributed to the female fish. So if the female fish did something that was unfeminine, then its culture will say bad woman or something like that, right? But those cultural conversations that you might have about sociological gender and those biological conversations you might have about biological gender, they're included in the word les poissons. So you can call something a man and still within it admit biological dyads and admit sociological dyads. Do you see how beautiful is this? So Prakriti is like that. It's like saying les poissons, or it's like saying la table. It doesn't necessarily like deny dyads, but it presents a meta dyad, if you will. How about that? So then there's a beautiful story where there was a sadhvi. She used to wander around naked, Mahadevi Akka. This story is attributed to many different sadhvis who also were like Naga Babas, Nagas. They would walk around naked. So then people would say, oh my god, put some clothes on, woman. Even today, you know, when I talk about Kali, I sometimes get comments and messages, and they're like, why do you talk about Kali as naked? She's Digambari. But in the innocence of nakedness, you in your consumer capitalist model, commodifying a woman's body, will say, ew, that's sexual. Why do you think it's kind of perverted that you think that? Like, if you think Kali's naked body is for like it's like pornographic, then it's like that's more a you problem than a her problem. She's wild and free and innocently naked without negating her arousal or sexuality. That's perfectly included in the view. But to say, oh, like you know, she's not naked is to have a kind of discomfort around nakedness and around the woman's body. And so I get a lot of comments on the internet. People are telling me like, she's not naked. You can't say she's naked. Don't you know her garland of skulls covers her breast and her girdle of human hands covers her yoni? So they try to put a sari on Kali. Even now when you go to Kali temples, a lot of the Kalis are dressed in saris. Because who wants to go and pray to a naked woman? Weirdly enough, in Indian temples, you have carvings, outright pornographic carvings of sexual bliss all around the temple. And then you go into the image and Kali is the quintessential representation of Digambari, a Dakini who is clad in only the space, and we put a sari on her. And even when we don't, we make sure her garland of skulls will cover her breast and a girdle of hands will cover her yoni. So like nakedness is an affront almost. So when we say Prakriti, everything within Prakriti is feminine. The embodiment itself is feminine. There isn't a woman's body or a man's body. There's just embodiment. And all of embodiment is included in Prakriti, you see. I was going somewhere with this naked Kali's nakedness point and like India's fear of a naked Kali thing, but then I forgot. I fell off the roof again. It's okay, we'll climb back on. To get to the roof, we climbed a few refrigerators. So let me just like clamber back onto this refrigerator and get back onto the roof and try to find my like discussion again. So when we say Purusha, we're referring to masculinity, but it's a masculinity of transcendence, it's a masculinity of seeing. So when I see a table, when I see a chair, when I see a tree, whether it's an androgynous tree or a plant that's masculine or feminine, when I see a person, whether it's a male body or a female body, or a male mind, culturally speaking, or a female mind, culturally speaking, all the time I'm seeing something, no? And whatever I'm seeing is called Prakriti. So if you put the abstract notion of immanence and dynamism aside, you can at least have the very tangible notion of objectivity, or the fact that something is being seen. This is what we mean by Prakriti. Anything that is being seen is called Prakriti. And that which does the seeing is called Purusha. But necessarily, the first point that Sankhya is going to make is that Purusha is not embodied. The seen are all embodied in that they are objects. So a table is there as a body, a human body is there as a body, and even the mind is a kind of embodiment. Notice, embodiment doesn't refer to physicality anymore. Embodiment refers even to mentality, which is a subtle form of physicality. I can prove this point. When I taste my tea, it's a sensation. Where do I experience that sensation? In my tongue? No, in my mind. Because the receptors of my tongue, using modern scientific models, picks up the signals of the tea and then translates those signals into electrical and chemical responses, which are then perceived by the brain and presented to the mind, which is in the modern scientific context considered to be an emergent property of the brain, which we of course reject. But like, if the mind emerges from the brain, it's in that mind, in that subtle realm of thought, that the sensation of coffee is perceived. So the coffee or the tea is not an external event. The tasting, the tanmatra of tasting, and that thing which is tasted is a feature of the mind. It's appearing in the manas. The buddhi, the intellect, interprets that experience as the taste of coffee. Do you see how all sensations are mental? It's the first point, like this stunning point in Sankhya, that all sensations, which we call physical, are actually mental. So your body is not in the world. That's why you cannot say I had an out-of-body experience. Because you were never in the body to begin with. If you were in the body and then you had some kind of psychedelic and then you felt your embodiment in a different way, in other words, you felt like, you know, you took 5-MeO DMT or something and you felt like you were blasting off. You like exited out through the crown chakra or something, you like left the body. You might then use language in this way. You may say, oh, I left the body, or I had an out-of-body experience. The moment you do that, you reify physicalist or reductionist materialist models that say you are in the body, or that your mind is an emergent property of the brain. Not so. Because in your experience, phenomenologically speaking, that doesn't hold up to reason. In your experience, you are not a body experiencing a mind. You are a mind in which the experience of the taste of tea occurs. Let's add even more nuance here. The body is a river of sensation. What is a body but a composite of tastes and smells and sights and textures and sounds? That's what we call embodiment. Embodiment is sensation, but the point I want to make is that sensation is nothing but an experience within the mind. So body is a sensation and sensations are mental. Now let's flip this. Let's say I think a thought. pink unicorn arm wrestling Jesus on Mars. Okay, like that's a thought. I'm not actually right now looking at a pink unicorn arm wrestling Jesus Christ on Mars. I'm not actually having that physical experience. But in another sense, I am. Because in my mind, I can imagine a red, barren wasteland. I remember also on another bender during Shivaratri, because we did Shivaratri like 3 times in our zeal, and Viranatha said something so inscrutable, because I think I missed something in the Kula chat or something, like there was a reference that I missed, so I spilt some kumkum or something, and then Viranatha made some point about some like Land Rover on Mars or whatever. The words went totally over my head. Like I had no idea at all what he was saying. And he like said it to me like with such certainty, like I would know what he meant. And I looked him in the eyes and I heard what he said. I heard all the words that he said, but the meaning didn't register in my mind. And I was like, oh my God, this is my aneurysm. Because Vijaya told me if I stay up too many nights in a row, like it's only a matter of time before like something snaps in my brain and I like die. So that this is not very sensitive of me. I shouldn't be making these jokes. That's why everybody thinks I have a death wish, by the way. They're all like, just because like death is laughable to me. And so I laugh at it. And so when Viranatha said this, I was like, haha, this must be my aneurysm. So I had no idea, like, this is my stroke. I have no idea what the fuck he just said. But he was making some reference to like a Land Rover on Mars or something. Anyway, so let me like just imagine that right now. In my mind, I'm seeing a wasteland of red. I've never actually been to Mars, but I'm imagining it. Then I'm seeing Jesus Christ. Maybe like the whitewashed Kurt Cobain Jesus Christ, or maybe like a more racially appropriate Jesus Christ. Who the fuck knows what he looked like? But I'm imagining what he looks like in my mind. Then I'm imagining a pink unicorn. I know what a horse looks like. And I'm just gonna put a narwhal horn on it. Viranatha is showing. Oh, that's it. Yeah, like what, bro? Like how on earth am I? Like I don't know that you own that thing. Like what? What? Anyway, it's so funny. Anyway, so then I'm thinking of a horse, but it's pink, and it has a narwhal type horn. And this narwhal horse is now standing up and arm wrestling Jesus. When I turn my hat around, it's like a switch. If you got that reference, I'm so proud of you. Sylvester Stallone. Anyway, so there's it's an arm wrestling movie, and he says famously in that movie, when I turn my hat around, it's like a switch. The whole movie is about competitive arm wrestling. Anyway, so I'm so happy we got to do a Virginia Woolf reference, a Fitzgerald reference. We got to do some Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight reference. I got to reference my favorite Linklater films, and now this weird Sylvester Stallone arm wrestling movie reference. This is turning out to be a great night for me. So anyway, I'm having so much fun. I hope you are too. It's only going to be worse from now on. Once I get into the Epic of Gilgamesh and Hammurabi stuff, it's going to be so fucking cracked out. You're going to be like, this guy is in full-on psychosis. And you know why? Because Bhairavi Nicola Devi gave me permission. When I got into the airport, she was like, you deserve a hot girl crash out. Okay, here we go. This is it. This is my hot girl crash out. Fabricio, good to see you, brother. I missed you. The tea is just a black tea, Harrell's or something like that, with some milk and some sugar. I actually don't put like ginger or pepper or anything. I'm a bit of a purist with tea. I just like milk, sugar, and black tea. Just the simple stuff. Because I'm so needlessly complicated everywhere else. At least let there be some spirituality in my life, some simplicity in my life. Let it be in my tea at least. I practice chai marga. Chai ma. Okay, so this idea, if I experience a sensation, it's going to be experienced in the mind. But if I think of a thought which is entirely a priori, entirely abstract, that too is sensual, notice. Because the data of like the red wasteland is a physical event that I must have experienced to have a memory to recreate. Or like the horse or the narwhal, these esemplastic poetic images of like a unicorn, whether or not they existed or exist is irrelevant. The fact is, a horse I've seen. A narwhal I've seen. I know what a horn is. Maybe I've seen a rhinoceros. So I can create an abstract, or we say esemplastic image, where I combine a bunch of different physical objects and create something new. And then in my mind, I'm creating a totally new scene of like this horse standing up with a horn, like wrestling Jesus Christ on a red, barren wasteland. Now, when I think about that, I'm actually having the subtle sensation of those things. That's when you read one of Viranatha's books, for instance. It's like, it's happening in your mind, but it's really happening. Because in your mind, as you think through the scenes that he's describing, you're living through them. That's why if you like read a lot of books, right? Today it's Mercury first house. What can I do? And Uranus just got into Gemini. I'm like, what did you say about my Anus? What is it doing in Gemini? Anyway, like this is so important that like even mental events have a physicality to them. And even if I say 2 + 2 = 4, that doesn't refer to a red, dusty wasteland that I may or may not have touched. It doesn't refer to a horse that I may or may not have smelled. Ashwagandha. It might not refer to a Jesus that I may or may not have hated or loved. Like, it's just 2 + 2 = 4. But just now think that thought, 2 + 2 = 4. There's a sensation to it, a very subtle sensation, because it's a purely abstract thought, but it's still sensed. Do you know what I mean by sensing? It is observed, it is seen, it is experienced. So either you experience the literal smell of red dust, or you experience it as a subtle remembrance, or you experience just this very subtle sense of 2 plus 2 equals 4. But all of it is considered embodied. All of it is considered sensation, either subtle or either physical. And both subtlety and physicality, both of them are subsumed in this other category called the object. How beautiful is Sankhya, huh? It just resolves all the dyads. Like, everybody's obsessed with duality in a very cheap way. Sankhya introduces duality in a very profound way. The non-duality we're talking about is actually with regards to Sankhyan duality, not with regards to duality in the world. Duality in the world is subsumed already in Sankhya. You know, Sankhya is non-dual with respect to Prakriti. Haven't you noticed? And that's what Aisha Ma was saying earlier about the feminine space. It's so beautiful. It's like all the discussions we're having about femininity are cultural and biological. Even Sankhya, the dualistic model of Sankhya, which introduces the concept of Shiva and Shakti in a very primordial way, where they actually introduce divine masculine and divine feminine, even they have resolved the dualities of the world by saying everything in the world is feminine. Why? Because everything in the world is dynamic and changing, but by that we mean everything is embodied. But by that we mean everything is sensed, and by that we mean everything is an object. I've gone far beyond just concepts now. I'm referring to a phenomenological thing that can be verified. Right now, are you not experiencing the world? Okay, fine. Sankhya will say everything that you experience in this world, both mental and physical, all of that is Prakriti. So the woman is the scene, right? Once the Getty or the Hammer Museum or something, they did a show, an exhibit, Men in Art. And what they were saying is that, like, most paintings are of women. Like, most painters are men who are painting women. And so now we wanted to, like, showcase art of men, like paintings of men. And I remember Vijaya turning to me, she's like, who the fuck wants to see that? We both had a great laugh about it. Both the male gaze and the feminine gaze both crave the feminine. Anyway. I wear a lot of eyeliner and like long flowing kurtas and things like that. So when I'm like, anytime I'm applying eyeliner in the airport or hotel bathroom, it's always really funny to see men come into the male bathroom behind me. Cause like, I get it. I have like long flowing hair and I'm wearing long flowing clothes and I'm applying my eyeliner. And so people walk into the bathroom and they're like, ha! And they like run. Like, one time I was in an airport bathroom. I think it was in Denver or something. And this like very sweet Chinese man walks in. Like probably visiting America or something. He walks in, he sees me, and I can see him in the mirror, right? Like there's a mirror, so I can see him, and he sees my back, like, and he makes a really loud sound. He goes, "Ah!" Like he's just like, "Oh fuck!" You know, I'm in the men's restroom. There was not an all gender bathroom there. It was just like, ah! And then he runs out, and the funniest thing is, he goes into the girls' bathroom, right? And then I hear that sound again there. I think like, what a prank. He like, ah! And then he goes, ah! I kid you not, this happened. Then he comes back into the male bathroom, and his like faces of shock and betrayal and confusement. I turn around, I'm just like, I get it, bro. I'm sorry. Don't worry. It's so funny. So I'm a woman in the bathroom, and I'm a woman at 11 p.m. to heterosexual men at the rave. Like with enough beers, it's like, okay, I'll hit on this guy too. But it's interesting though, because the scene. Oh, and I also make another joke. It's like, I've never dated a girl who was not also bisexual. But like, the scene is the feminine, as it were. And you can see there's an art theory here, an aesthetic theory here too. Prakriti is described poetically and aesthetically in Sankhya as a performer, as an artist, as a woman dancing, right? Whereas Purusha is described as the man who is watching. But what does the man watch? Male bodies and female bodies. Both male bodies and female bodies are included in the feminine idea of the scene. All thoughts, culturally conditioned or otherwise, are included in the idea of Sankhyan Prakrititva or femininity. So again, we define femininity as the changing, as the dynamic. We define that as the embodied. We define that as the sense. And we define that as both bodies and minds which appear to us as objects. How subtle, nuanced, and sophisticated is this idea? That's why I'm just spending my time here a little bit more. Because it's so beautiful. And it just elevates the conversation away from like political and biological spheres. The higher up you go, the more clearly you see everything, right? And we've gone a little higher, I would say. Not to say anything is not valuable on a lower level. This just gives a different level of definition. Okay, so now, the scene. I am the seer. Notice the seer has no physicality, nor does it even have mentality. The seer is not a psychological function. The seer is that to which all psychological functions appear as objects. Therefore, thoughts are not consciousness. Thoughts are objects. Dreams are not consciousness. Dreams are objects. Nothing that happens in the mind can be called the subject because all of them are subjected to the subject. All of them are objects to the subject. So the subject has no body. So you cannot say in Sankhya that masculinity has to do with the body. Nor does the subject have thought. So you cannot say that in Sankhya masculinity has to do with cultural conditioning or gender. Gender is in the mind, sex is in the body. So if you consider the divine masculine and the divine feminine to refer to notions of sex or gender, Sankhya doesn't. Right? Therefore, why can I have this conversation? Again, I'm going to open the floor later and hopefully we can hear some feminine voices. But again, we're just taking that concept of femininity to a different place and we're saying, why am I allowed to have this conversation? Well, I'm not, but because Purusha is not me as Nish. And Nish is not the Purusha if I am the Purusha. So now it's a question of who am I? Am I the Purusha or am I the Prakriti? If I am the Prakriti, then I am the body and I am the mind. And if femininity has to do with the body and mind, then I'm not a woman. I'm a man. I have male genitals, and no amount of eyeliner and no amount of wearing long flowing clothes will give me the female experience. Do you know what I mean? I can apply as much eyeliner as I want, and I can wear my nail polish, and I can walk around the world, and I can spout poetry. You know? My concept of masculinity is very influenced by Don Juan in Lord Byron, and obviously my idea of romance is poetic, and romantic to me means image making, symbolic, subconscious stuff, right? You can use a psychological thing and say, oh, that's a feminine way. It's a feminine approach. Art is feminine and science is masculine. The conscious mind is masculine. The subconscious mind is feminine. Whatever I may or may not think and whatever I may or may not do or wear, that will never give me the experience of being a woman in the world. I will still have the experience of being a brown man in America, not a brown woman in America. Right? Because the experience of being a woman is in the world of experience determined by the body and mind. So if I am this body and if I am this mind, then I cannot weigh in on issues of femininity. I'm disqualified from that discussion, like Swamiji said, right? Why are you asking me? Go ask women, and what they tell you, do that. So it's not as niche, the body and mind, that we can make this point, right? So then we have to ask this next question. Who are you then? Are you this body and are you this mind? Or are you the one to whom the body and mind appears? This is very easy to prove. Again, it's a phenomenological point. Greg Good's experiment. If you hold your hand up like this, you look at the hand, the question we have to ask is, am I looking at the hand or is the hand looking at me? In other words, do I experience myself as a body experiencing the mind? Or do I experience myself as consciousness experiencing the mind and body? We don't even need to get into hard problem of consciousness or the relationship between the body and mind. All of those discussions are second tier. They're peripheral to the one that we're trying to have now. Those are cheap ideas, actually. Does the brain produce the mind or does the mind produce the body? No. Who cares? Whether the brain produces the mind or the mind produces the body, both of them are objects appearing to me. The only question I'm asking you now is, are you perceiving them or are they perceiving you? Am I this body and mind called Nish perceiving Purusha? Or am I Purusha, spirit, perceiving this body and mind called Nish? The claim that we're making is aham, naham, mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. I am not the mind. And importantly, I am not Nish. Nish is a feature of the mind, the ahankara. And Nish, which experiences itself through the body, is itself a feature of the mind. I am experiencing that mind. So I cannot be Nish, I cannot be Nish's body, and I'm also not Nish's experience. I am that in which Nish's experience comes and goes. It doesn't mean that I'm having anybody else's experience. It just means that Nish's experience is not indicative of who I am. Who I am is that which reveals and illumines and presents Nish's experience. So having said all of that then, as Purusha, we say we are men. So in this sense, you're all men. If you define Purusha as consciousness, as that which perceives, then you are all of you, Shiva. Man. Do you see? And it's nothing to do with your genitals or gender. So man here means the transcendent function of seeing, and woman here means Prakriti, the immanent function of being seen. So the dichotomy is not really between transcendence and immanence. Those are abstract words. The dichotomy is not even between the static and the dynamic. Again, that's pretty abstract and too abstract for us. The dynamic is between the disembodied and the embodied, which again can be too abstract. But this is not abstract. What I'm talking about now is tangible and immediately available to you. It can be verified. It's a phenomenological claim. I'm saying right now, do you experience yourself as the body? Or are you experiencing the body? Or rather, right now, are you the body experiencing yourself or are you experiencing the body? You can answer that right now. I'm experiencing the body. What is the body but a series of sensations? Then you ask, am I experiencing the mind? Yes, I'm experiencing the mind. That's just true. It just feels true. It's indubitably true. And then I ask, what is the nature of your experience? It is formless, for it presents form. It itself has no form. If it were to have a form, it would be relegated to the object. If you perceive the form of the body, and if you perceive the form of the mind, then that which perceives the body and mind is itself formless. For if it were subjected to form, it would be subjected to prakriti, to objectivity. Is this clear? Subtle idea, important idea. Okay, so I, the seer, am called Purusha, spirit. That is called Shiva, man. And the seen, which appears to me, is called Prakriti. That is called the woman, which includes even male bodies. Like the word le poisson includes even female fish or androgynous fish. I'm so excited about this, you guys. Like, isn't this so big brain? Like, it's just so beyond all the political discussions that we all have in the context of, like, the world. Right? Also, Loss, I have no idea what you're texting me, bro. Like, every time you text me, like, goteam, like, are you using the Dutch word to say I'm cute? Like, I don't know what goteam is. Because, like Loss texted me, you smell like cheese, goteam. And I'm like, cool. And I'm like, and I sent back a meme of a rat eating cheese. And then he goes, goteam. And then I asked somebody next to me, I was like, what does that mean? And they were like, oh, in Dutch, it means you're very attractive. So I'm like, did Loss say to me, you smell like cheese, you're very attractive? I'm like, I've heard stranger things. But anyway, I just saw your face and I was like, bro, what are you texting me? Like, what does any of that mean?
It's like got him, like, you know, like the these nuts guy.
Oh, like got him.
Yeah, like got him.
I appreciate your absurdity and randomness. Like out of nowhere, he's just like, you smell like cheese, got him. I'm like, this cool. Okay.
Got him.
Got him. I got. What can I say? I got. Yeah, I haven't showered since Friday, so point sustained. Okay,
yeah, I can smell you from here, man.
Yeah, bro.
Watch that ass, bro.
I've been dancing. Haven't showered. Anyway, what can I do? So, okay, coming back to this. The body showers or doesn't shower. The mind is clean or unclean. But, like, I am not the body, nor am I the mind. I am that to which the body and mind appear. Okay, this is very important. That has no form. And in one sense, that is gendered as masculine. So the masculine is the formless, seer, and the embodied feminine is the with form, seen. So another dyad appears, formless and form. So formless and form, transcendent and immanent, static and changing. So now notice the nature of the objects that present themselves to you, they are changing. Because even the body like grows. It sometimes smells good, it sometimes smells bad. Maybe. And again, what smells good and what smells bad is entirely culturally conditioned. One person's smell of cheese is attractive, and another person's smell of cheese is repulsive. Like again, all of those are culturally conditioned. But they're changing. Cultures change. Their ideas change. What it means to be a woman changes. Like in first wave feminism, you could say what it means to be a woman. Again, I don't need to get into the waves. That can be a bit complicated. But you could say like what it means to be a woman is to just do men's things, either as well as men or better than men. So Mulan, in the Disney series, like the Disney movie, represents femininity in the sense that she becomes a soldier and does what a man does. But notice, she does it in a woman's way. So she excels at men's things, which arguably from a cultural point of view is war, but she excels at it because she has a womanly touch or a womanly instinct. You know, so I once pointed this out. I was like, to what extent is Mulan really a feminist symbol? Because, you know, it's like kind of an outdated idea of feminism that it's like going to be like Betty the Riveter, kind of like, I'm as strong as a man kind of thing. It's like, well, that's only if you define strength using masculine cultural concepts of like being able to lift heavy weights. So if a woman lifts very heavy weights or excels in sports, we're like, oh, look, she's like a man. And, you know, women's soccer is not watched quite as much as men's soccer kind of thing. So like when we watch sports, we often watch the male version of those sports. So we say, well, women can play football too, but we still don't have them in the same league, acknowledging certain biological factors. So when a woman overcomes those biological factors, most of the women in my life could kick my ass. It doesn't actually say very much about them because I'm pretty ass kickable, I guess. I mean, look at me. Yesterday, it was so cute. Like the adventure, like the things that happen throughout the course of the bender are really great. So we had to go and help somebody kick a guy out of our house, right? And it was really funny because we were going to go to this house, and this girl who I was helping, she was like, can you come with me? Like, you and I will go to this house and we'll help our other girlfriend out, kick this guy out of the house, right? And I was like, yeah, I'll come with you, but at most I can chant a mantra or two. Like, if in the course of a physical alteration, I could at the very least like distract the guy and you guys can get out. But like, don't come at me like actually kick his ass. Like I'm a pretty poor choice for this fight if you need. But I will come obviously and do my best. But it's like, I mean, you guys can kick my ass. So like, in that situation, you'll probably be protecting me. It was just funny. Anyway, it was very successful. But anyway, coming back to this, if Mulan goes to war, and if war is considered a masculine thing, then Mulan is a feminist icon because as a woman she can do what a man can do. So I once pointed this out, I'm like, is that really feminism? Because it just means that men have successfully imposed their concepts of strength on women and are forcing women now to like do that. And the degree to which they can do that is the degree to which they are strong women. So it's femininity defined by predominant masculine ideas of what, like, you know, a man can do and what a woman cannot do, right? So is Mulan that? Is she a symbol of men can do what women can do what men do just as well? And then my friend, she pointed out that, like, no, actually it's deeper, it's subtler, because we're watching the movie, and she was like, look, she's doing it in a woman's way. The skills that she acquires as a woman are skills that men have not acquired, and so she's using those skills ingenuously to do things that men would never be able to do. So she's better than a male soldier, or at least she's different from a male soldier because she has these unique sets of skills. So therefore, she's a feminist icon because it shows you how a woman in a woman's way can do a man's job. Right? So then the question is, does a woman lose her empowerment if she wears a burqa? And then some feminists would say we have to free women from the burqas. Other Islamic feminists will say, no, a woman can choose to wear a burqa. It's her right to wear a burqa. And what real feminism is about is empowering women to have their choices. So if a woman wants to stay home and have children and be married and wear a burqa, in no way, shape, or form is that contrary to the feminist ideal, as long as she has the option to do that. Right? Like, whether a woman jumps into the fire and follows her husband or not, that's not actually the conversation that we want to have. If a woman jumps into the fire in the sati rite and follows her husband into death, like a Death Cab for Cutie song or something, then if the woman herself chose to do that, that would be celebrated. What, like Rajput women, rather than be raped by Mughal invaders, they all themselves together march into a funeral pyre, like of their own accord. Everyone is like, Mom, don't do this, and they're like, no, I will defend my purity and my honor. No Mughal will touch this body. And she walks into a pyre, right? Sonu's people. So it's like really important. Like Rajputana women of their own accord during that particular Mughal invasion all walked into a funeral pyre together, led by a very strong warrior woman. Many of them took swords and fought on the battlefield alongside their husbands, like in a very Mulan kind of way. And many of them, when they lost the war, they just jumped into the fire of their own accord. That was great. Now you can imagine, like, an older world feminist saying something like, oh my god, the very fact that a woman has to wear a burqa or like raise children or step into a fire to follow her dead husband, that's manifestly bad. No, it's not. What is manifestly bad is that women are forced into those things. So if a woman is thrown into the fire, that's very different. If a woman is forced to raise children when she doesn't want to, if a woman is forced to be married, that's different. And if a woman is forced to have a burqa on, that maybe can be opposed. But if she wants to, party time. So a woman should be able to decide what it is to be a woman. Working in an office and making a lot of money doesn't like mean that women are successful. It only means that men have successfully indoctrinated them into doing men's things. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's very important that, like, feminism, what it means to be successful as a woman is like hotly contested. But again, here it's like not even the discussion. The discussion is I as Purusha, the witness, am witnessing all of that. The Mulan Leela is all happening within me, and I am as much Mulan as I am any other male soldier on the battlefield. All that is appearing to me, and I'm here as the perceiver. So in one sense, we are all of us Purusha, masculine, and presented to us as feminine. So nobody here is a woman in this sense. But femininity exists in all the objects that we perceive. So your body is a woman, your mind is a woman, whatever genitals it may have, and whatever cultural conditioning you may be subjected to. But you are always the man, Purusha. So you are always Shiva, and presented to you is always Prakriti. Okay? So that's that. So again, Purusha and Prakriti don't necessarily refer to gender except in a grammatical sense, but now in a poetical and aesthetical sense, we'll start to add all these interesting layers when we use the word Shiva and Shakti, and then finally we'll reconcile them in the Ardhanareshwar idea, which is the ultimate goal of this lecture, and then we'll open the floor. So I'm going to move on now. So coming to this Purusha Prakriti idea, using an aesthetic and poetic metaphor, we can say Prakriti is a dancer. She's like this beautiful, like, dancer dancing, and we are the witness, the audience, as it were. So Sankhya doesn't actually want you to stop the dance or turn away from the dance. Sankhya just wants you to recognize that it's a dance. Like Swami Vivekananda was saying, see the world as a beautiful picture, step back, knowing that nothing affects you, enjoy its beauty. Be mad with joy, even at evil. The same way you can enjoy a horror movie, you can look at your life, the sickness in the body or the grief in the mind, you can enjoy the poetic beauty of that. The rasa, the bibhatsa rasa, or the karuna rasa, the raudra rasa, or even bhayanaka rasa, even fear. Like watching a horror movie, you can enjoy watching a horror movie. But you don't have to turn off the movie because you don't really feel scared. You're feeling scared in a rasa kind of way, in a Bhayanaka rasa kind of way. So that's why last week's discussion on aesthetics is so important. I would recommend that you watch that actually. I haven't uploaded it yet because my computer ran out of space, and now I haven't bought a hard drive because my rebound after I'm not gonna get into it. But anyway, So I don't have a hard drive. That's a whole story. I don't have a hard drive, and so it's gonna be a while before I can upload it, I think, until I get that hard drive. So I'm gonna get it probably today or something, not today, tomorrow or something, and then I'll upload it. So maybe within the week, it'll be called I don't even know what it's going to be called. Something about aesthetics, tantric aesthetics or Shaiva aesthetics, something. But it's good to watch that lecture because we talk about why. Yeah, I'm gonna scroll out of that tangent. That is horrifically unnecessary. I realize that is a real tangent with not even an elliptical significance for this lecture. It's just a story that I will tell in my own time. So this is important that that lecture you watch, because there we really get into Rasavada, the doctrine of the Navarasas, and Anantavartana's concept of Dwani or poetic suggestion, all very important discussions for not only Shaivism in its tantric form, but even Sankhya. Even classical Sankhya will use this kind of aesthetics, because it'll say that just because something is scary doesn't mean it's bad. It's only bad if you identify with the body and mind in which sickness and grief is experienced. But if you identify with Purusha, the spaciousness of knowing you are other than this world actually allows you to engage with it more fully. So Sankhya is often misrepresented here as a dissociative, like negating kind of philosophy that says, oh, I am Purusha, that I'm not the body and mind. Every time I've said I am not the body, I'm not the mind, it's not to negate the experience of the body and mind, it's to more fully experience it with fearlessness. I know I'm not affected by the body and mind, so I can watch what happens on the level of the body and mind. Just like I know I'm not the character in the movie actually being brutally murdered, then I can actually enjoy the experience of someone being brutally mutilated on the screen. It would be horrible if I was that person, but I'm not. In the horror movie, I'm watching that person. And that's exactly what your life is like in each and every moment. It's a picture, it's a painting, it's a movie presented to you. There's an entire verse, a practice in the Vijnana Bhairava dedicated to this. And in Vivekananda, Thousand Islands Park, he says, see this world as a beautiful picture. Knowing that nothing affects you, stand back and enjoy its beauty. Right? How beautiful that view. So Sankhya is aesthetic in this way. So then we use the metaphor of a dancer. Prakriti is this beautiful dancer. And if you say, oh, she doesn't exist, it's like turning away. It's like when that Notch girl was singing the Surya Das song and Vivekananda refused to go and watch the performance because he said, I'm a monk. I should not be watching a beautiful dancing girl sing the song. And she was offended by that. And Swamiji could hear her song from next door, and her song was a Surya Das, beautiful Surya Das song, which says, why am I a fallen woman to you? When a metal touches the philosopher's stone, whether it's a butcher's knife or a ceremonial blade, both of them turn to gold, don't they? The woman in her song, this is like a sex worker, who in her song teaches Swamiji the highest lessons of Indian philosophy. And you know what happens? Swamiji, who didn't want to look at her, he runs back into the room and falls at her feet and says, forgive me, mother. In other words, he forgot his knowledge. He felt, I'm a monk. He is identifying with the body and mind. She's a sex worker, identifying with her body and mind. And I cannot, as a monk by trade, go and listen to that song. And he was scolded by the goddess for it. And so he came back and he fell at her feet and he said, I'm sorry, mother. And he enjoyed the rest of the performance. Isn't that beautiful? Like, these are little moments which have such theological significance. Swamiji becomes a Shakta in that moment. Like he became a Shakta when he saw Kali on that Tuesday night when Ramakrishna pushed him. He became even more Shakta when his sister killed herself. These are very important moments in Swamiji's experience as a male spiritual teacher in India that teach him these ideas. Anyway, so coming back to this, we don't have to look away from the dancer. In fact, we shouldn't demean her. You know, once I heard a Vedantist say this. You know what it's like? You're watching a dancer and you're hypnotized by the dancer's dance, and then a wind blows and the wind knocks off her wig and like messes up her makeup, and then she's embarrassed and she starts to cry and runs off stage. And I'm like, what a terrible way to put it. It's like she's giving you a dance and you're upset about it. You're saying, oh, she's hypnotizing me. And you're celebrating the wind for revealing her in all her ugliness. Because apparently the dance is not as beautiful as you thought it was because it was just a wig and it was just a makeup. Fuck you. Like the idea that somehow a woman without makeup and without hair, that would be like a problem. And that somehow that her hair and her makeup is magic. That somehow magic is befuddling. No, it's only because you are a weakling and a fool that you look upon a beautiful woman and feel threatened and feel like you have to put her in a bag. Like, chill. Beauty is not a threat. It's not an attempt to hypnotize you. If you are hypnotized, it doesn't say anything about her, it says everything about you. So like you'll see about Indian philosophy, it's like always shifting the burden over to the woman, over to Prakriti. And the goal is to divest her of her makeup and of her hair to realize she's not as beautiful as you thought she was. No, she's beautiful. You just don't know how to enjoy beauty. You know, you don't understand rasa. You think if something is beautiful, you should go and fuck it. Therefore, you experience kama, not shringara. And when I talk about erotic things, you think in your perversion and in your like shame, you think I'm being sexual. It is you alone. There are Taliban groups, by the way, who have a problem with Donald Duck because he's not wearing pants. You're just like that. If you think that when I talk about Shiva and Shakti having sex and that somehow that's like pornographic or something, that's your problem, not mine. We have shringara rasa, the erotic sense, and we can speak in erotic terms without being perverts. You are a pervert if you think all erotic is lust. You know, lust and eros are different things, and they're different because of rasa. The ability to experience beauty and not need to possess it or engage with it in any way is called shringara rasa. And that's what it is about the world. Like, you don't want to look at the world because you think you'll be seduced by the world, but that's not the world's fault. You don't have to tear off her wig and her makeup. And we say it's not a wig and a makeup, it's her actual beauty. And not to say wig and makeup doesn't make beauty. I'm just saying, like, inherently, inalienably, no wind will disrupt the beauty of this world because it is inherently beautiful. And Swamiji says so. Look upon this world as a beautiful picture, be mad with joy even at evil, seeing it all as God's play. But to do this, you have to step back and know that nothing affects you, just like you do in art. If you don't disambiguate to some extent from the characters in the movie, you can't fully be with their experience. You don't have the safety to really feel what they're feeling because you think you're feeling it. But if you have the safety of knowing you're not the body and mind, look, this is not dissociation. This is not negation. This is not refusing to see the woman dancing. This is finally being able to watch her dance. So you see, in the image of Kali dancing on Shiva, Shiva must be completely surrendered. He must not try to possess Kali. He must not try to push her away. He must not even judge or project anything upon her, telling her what she should or shouldn't do. Kali, you're a mother. I don't dare say that. I don't say, oh, Kali, you're my mother, because I don't want to put that on her. Do you know, what if my mother wants to go and sign up at a clay making workshop down the street? And I say, oh, mom, I'm hungry, feed me. Then what, she has to stay in the house and make kitchery for me? No, mother, let me starve and die. I would rather you go and dance and do your clay making. I refuse to call Kali my mother these days. I used to say, oh, ma, but I grew up. I'm no longer that child who needs his mother, you know? Like, I can handle myself now, I think. Because I'm not the body and mind. And what I am needs nothing. So therefore, I don't need Kali to be my mother. I only need Kali to be my mother if I'm the body and I'm hungry and I think mother should feed the body. But is not mother the body? Then if the body is hungry, won't mother feed it? And if she doesn't feed it and the body dies, is that my problem? So then why should I call Kali a mother? Am I a child to call Kali a mother? No, I'm not Kali's child. I'm Shiva. And so are you. And therefore, I'm Kali's husband. But I'm the kind of husband who's okay with an open relationship. In other words, I'm okay with Kali doing whatever the fuck she wants. I just don't need to, like, tell her what to do or what not to do. Do you know? I've had so many people in my life, partners and otherwise, who have been like, why don't you have any boundaries? Like, it's a big problem in our relationship that I can just do whatever. And I'm like, no, it's a matter of religious, theological preference. Like, I just don't think a man should say to a woman what she can or cannot do, whether sexually or romantically or emotionally or politically or whatever. You know, it's like, just whatever. Like, do whatever you want. And I think that's like threatening. It's like, well, there should be some structure. There should be some rules. Even in the context of teaching, people are like, what should I do? I don't know. Like, I don't know what you should do. Like, I can just talk about these ideas, but what you do is what you do. Like, I'm not going to give you advice. I'm not going to tell you meditate this long or chant this much mantra or do this kind of purasharana. I'll just say, oh, the texts say this. Kularnava Tantra says this is what a purasharana looks like. This is what I've done and it's what's worked for me. But just because it's worked for me, it's not going to work for you. So if you expect me to be your guru and give you instruction, that's manifestly problematic for me. Because why should I tell you what to do? Whether you're a woman or otherwise. Be free, do whatever you want. If I call you my mother, I'm fucked. I'm fucked because I infantilize myself. I say I'm the kind of thing that needs to be fed. And if I call you my mother, you're fucked. Because then you will feel the burden of like having to like take care of me. Take care of yourself. Handle yourself. Go to the clay workshop and sign up there and have fun. So Shiva doesn't even consider himself Kali's husband even. And even if he does, he's the kind of husband that is kind of aloof in the sense that he's full in and of himself. Isn't that so beautiful? He's like full. Oh my God, Aisha, whoa, that's so cool. I've never had that thought in my life, and I don't even know the implication of what that means yet, so I'm really excited to hear you develop that view. Yes, Kalidasi, what do you got?
I love what you're saying, but then I get confused because I'm trying to find my sovereignty. But then every time I talk about it with people, I say, oh, but you're Shakti, you're all over the place. You need masculine. They say it's right too. You need a container for your Shakti. Like I'm missing something because I'm not.
Okay, so like, notice, they're saying to you, right? Like people are saying to you, you need to contain your Shakti, right? But you know what's interesting? Again, notice that whole discussion is still on a lower level. It's still happening in Prakriti. Like remember when we were driving and then you were like, I like this energy. Because like you and I, we're fucked. Like you and I together, we just like dawdle and we go around Chaos Harbor and like when I get out in the Phoenix airport and Kalidasi picks me up and it's just the two of us, we can't get out of the airport because we're not focusing on the road. I'm like talking, like I'm trying to figure out the music situation. We're like just talking about stuff, and it's not interesting to me to like figure out where to go. I rather just have conversations and talk about art. Like it, like we're so ineffective together, right? Like we're just like whatever. And it was so funny. Kuleshwari and I were out, and we're like, wait, we are without our handlers. Andrew G is not here, and Vijay is not here. So like, it's like we're fucked. It's like we're never gonna get to anything on time. We're just dawdling. So like, I get like from that point of view, it's like if you're that kind of person, then it's not a gender thing. Because I'm in a male body, you're in a quote unquote female body, and we're both equally bad at directions. I can't drive, and you drive, but you barely can. And I always say to Kalidas, I'm like, girl, you are too cute to drive. Wait, let me just pause the recording. I want to say something off record real quick. See, a masculine sense of discipline, which I never demonstrate in my life because I just do what I want whenever I want. But look, I can do it. I'm containing myself. And then people say, oh, that's masculine. Discipline, yogic discipline. Wanting to do something and not doing it is masculine. Or like having like structure and containers are masculine, right? Like again, all of that whole discussion is psychological and biological. So when we were in that car and then Royji was driving, it was great because Roy fucking got us out of Chaos Harbor. Like Roy was the only one who could fucking do that, right? But like to say that Roy is the masculine in that situation would deny Roy his crazy like look at him on the dance floor. Fucking Roy is just like fucking it up. He's like Kali on the battlefield, you know? Like the fact that he got us out of Chaos Harbor doesn't mean Roy is like containing the Shakti that you are, right? And the fact that you are scattered doesn't mean that you are adding Shakti to Roy who needs none. Do you know what I'm saying? The fact that Roy is a man and that Kalidas is a woman has nothing to do with that moment when you're like, thank you for containing me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's what I was trying to negate with the first hour of this conversation. I'm trying to move this beyond bodies. I'm trying to move this beyond minds. I'm trying to move this beyond this new age concept of dynamism in the mind and dynamism in the body, right? A man is not one who contains. But again, a man here is the formless Purusha. So my question to you, Kalidas, is, in that moment, are you this body? And you have this problem where you keep referring to your age. The age is just a body, girl, right? Like, the mind is just like, you are not the body or the mind. You are Shiva. So you are the container in which both Roy and Kalidasi are having that conversation. Like, I'm howling in the backseat, Roy is laughing and driving us out of Chaos Harbor, and you are celebrating him for being able to do that. All of that occurs within you, right? That was a beautiful moment, but it has nothing to do with your femininity. It's nothing to do with his masculinity. It's nothing to do with my insanity in the backseat, you know? Like, all of that is beside the point, but it is the point, and it's contained by you. Do you see? A containment. Kali, you could say, she's Saturn. Doesn't Saturn limit? Because if you do something, Kali will kick your ass. Isn't she containing you? So that's it. You notice what I mean? She's masculine, right? Like she's Saturn. She sets limits and boundaries. She is the ultimate limitation of the universe. Kshepo, Jnanam, Sankyam, Gatinada, Kramat, Kalanam. These are all words that imply limitation, impeding, and also movement. So how can you say Kali is wild and free when Kali is time and space, which are the factors that limit me, ultimately? Do you see what I mean? Like, it's so cheap. The conversations we have around femininity are so under-nuanced because they use dynamism and immanence in this, like, somewhat superficial way. I'm saying dynamism and immanence have to do with the embodied experience, but the embodied experience is more than just the body. It's literally any object that you can experience. So I only have to ask, in that car, were you experiencing your body? Were you experiencing your mind? Were you experiencing Chaos Harbor? You were, right? And then you were experiencing Roy, like helping us get out of the fucking airport, which is the first time we've ever been able to do that in that short of a time. And then, weren't you experiencing me howling in the backseat? Okay, if you were experiencing that, all of that is an object to you. All of that is Shakti, including your body and mind. So you are Shiva. So you're containing it in a deeper way. You're containing it by holding space for all of it, including the chaos and the restraint of chaos. Both of those things are Kali. Do you see? Kali restrains, Kali releases. To say Kali does one and not the other, then I'm like, then I'm gonna impose the Prakriti idea that like les poissons doesn't just refer to male fish. So Kali doesn't just refer to the crazy wild stuff. She also refers to the wildness of limitation.
That's right? Also kind of what I was getting at in the beginning, where I was saying that she kind of does this both.
Yeah.
Of like, you know, she has both of those things where like there's this like connotation of like when she's wild, that like it's like when you're wild, it's kind of like you're almost like depleting. There's like a depleting connotation to being wild, like you're kind of being depleted of something. But it's like maybe you need to be depleted. Even in that depletion, something good can arise out of that, or you know, whatever good is, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Something new comes out of that, just like, you know, a forest burning.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly,
Like
exactly.
it's necessary, you know, it's
Yes,
kind of
yes.
like that kind of thing. So it's like it's that essence.
Yeah, there's like a paradox, and the obverse and the reverse, they nourish each other. Like transformation is the word we use for death, because death and birth are like the same, right? So it's like that is what you're referring to, and I think it's so cool. And that's why it's like, when, like, okay, so I'll sit and I'll meditate. I won't move for 8 hours. You've seen me. And then you say, oh, Shiva, he's sitting and is disciplined. But no, I'm doing that because I want to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, anytime I've expressed discipline in my life, it's because I just want to. And so, therefore, I say I have no discipline because I just go with my impulses. But that's a lot of people have come to harm when they try to do that, because then they think, oh, like, I won't meditate. But no, I meditate a lot. It's just that I don't think you need to, but I want to. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I'm saying, like, all the times in my life that I've expressed discipline, people have been like, oh, Shiva. And all the times that I've expressed, like, expression, oh, Kali. But neither of that have to do with me. Shiva and Kali, again, here, we're reframing this. So the paradox is like, why would I care about conserving energy? I'm not energy. I'm that which experiences energy. Do you see how I'm trying, like, very hard to pull us away from almost every other conversation we've ever had about Shiva and Shakti when it pertains to energy, body, mind? All of those are objects, right? Like, all conversations about, like, the obverse and the inverse of coins, energy, depletion, and adding, these are also nuanced. And Sonu's point is like, look, the fact that, like, they both involve one another mean there's a kind of non-duality to them. So if you say containment and wildness are two poles, notice what Sonu's pointing out is that wildness is containing and containment enables wildness. A good example here is, if you practice scales every single day and you contain yourself to the discipline of practicing scales, when you take a guitar solo, you can be as wild as you want. Your wildness is empowered by your discipline. You know, and that's why, Kalidasi, you missed my rallying. As Kalidasi is walking out of this rave, like, she says goodbye to me while I'm throwing up in the I'm throwing up in, like, a trash can, and Kalidasi is walking out, and she texts, she's like, Nish might be dead though. Girl, I've never been so, you didn't see me rally after that. Your boy can really fucking rally. But anyway, my point here is to say, like, I'm really good at partying. You know, because, and I noticed part of that is because of, like, yogic practice, you know, and I realized, like, the discipline that I invest in yogic practices allows me to, like, really have fun in this world. But I noticed that with music too. The amount of work that I put into disciplined, scheduled guitar practice, like, allows me to be as wild as I want when I solo. But the less discipline I have in my practicing, then the less options seem available to me when I take a guitar solo. I'm like, just like, I'm constrained by my lack of ability. But to get ability, I must constrain myself to the practice. Do you see, like, all these paradoxes in here? And when Sonu points these out, notice the reason why our conversations about masculine and feminine are so confiscated. Obfuscated. My mind got confiscated by that tangent. But it's so obfuscated is because we're trying to talk about a paradox, and we're trying to assign duality to the paradox. The moment we assign one thing to one thing, it becomes the other thing. But I'm just stepping away from all of that. I'm just saying, like, that's cheap. That's beautiful, but so does pointing out why it's beautiful, because it's fluid and ultimately meaningless to talk about things in that way, right? Because it just, when you say one, it's true of the other. And what is true of one is true of the other, because you're just talking about Prakriti. So we're saying the Purusha, which cannot be talked about, which is not an object, which is the one to whom all talking and silence appears, which is the one to whom all objectivity appears, that's the masculine in the Sankhyan sense. That's Purusha. Right? The masculine is not a function of containment or release. It's not a function of discipline or expression. It's not a function of moving or staying still. All of those are contained in the feminine. Feminine can be both. Right? That's why my pet peeve, I have many of them these days. I have more of them these days. I guess I'm getting older. I'm getting grumpier. But there was somebody here. They were having a debate about Chinnamastaka. We were talking about Boston. By the way, I'm going to be in Boston on Wednesday for Chinnamasta Jayanti. And we're just talking about the pujas that we were planning. And so this Baba who was sitting here, and there was a woman sitting there. He said, oh, I started some Chinnamastaka sadhanas. I approached it very carefully. She's very fierce. Then she flexed on him. She was like, oh, you think Chinnamastaka is fierce? She's actually really gentle. But it's like a flex, right? It's kind of like, oh, she's fierce to you because you suck, but I'm fierce to you. Like, and then we get in this thing, Kali fierce? Is Kali nice? I see it all the time. People are like, oh, you're scared of Kali? You think she's fierce? She's actually really gentle. I'm like, fuck you. How dare you take the fangs away from my divine mother? How dare you take away her sword and put there a lute? How dare you say it's only the demons that she kills? She's holding a nara, Bali. Kali will kill you. She hates you. Right? She hates you. And she wants to kill you. If you say, no, she loves you, how dare you deny her the ability to hate you? Doesn't it happen your mother and your wife can hate you at times? Like, that's cool that she does. She's a complex being. She can do that. And also, she loves you. Because hate and love are not really that different for her. And so if you say Kali is kind, you're right. And if you say Kali is cruel, you're right. If you say Kali is not scary, you're right. And if you say Kali is scary, you're also right. But the problem is when you say one is true and the other isn't. then you're being a man about it and not able to hold opposites. I was making a joke yesterday with Cisco. I was like, you know how Indians do this? Because he asked me something and I went like, and he was like, was that yes or a no? And then we had this wonderful discussion about how like it's both, because the unique ability of Indian culture is to do this. We're saying both yes and no at the same time. We can do that because our languages allow for it, our philosophies allow for it. And to allow Kali to have both left hands and right hands is the unique feature of Kali. So I hate it, my pet peeve. And again, I love it, right? Like hate and love are the same. But I hate it. I hate it when people say she only has right hands. And I hate it when people say she only has left hands. Because it confines her to being one or the other. Then it confines people like Kalidasi, because you as a woman feel like, oh, I need to like, have this other thing. But it's like, no, you have both things already. There are probably many areas in your life where someone will say, oh, that's very masculine of you. Like my anecdote earlier, right? And there are many areas in your life where someone will say, that's very feminine of you. Because femininity now is understood on a higher order as that which subsumes these seeming dualities. Do you see? This is very sophisticated, very profound, and very important that we stay with. This is one of the key insights of Sankhya, that Prakriti contains within it male bodies and female bodies, male cultural conditioning and female cultural conditioning, and all this new agey spiritual stuff about the divine masculine, divine feminine, all that which you've heard, all of it is Kali. Kali contains and subsumes all the opposites. Purusha then, Shiva, is that which contains Kali, not by limiting her or directing her. By the way, Purusha cannot direct Kali. Kali is self-directed, right? Shiva doesn't direct Kali. That's very important. He's just lying down. Kali dances by her own rhythm. Shiva's not even beating a drum and like influencing her rhythm. Now notice, while I'm speaking poetically and using the metaphor of Shiva dancing on Kali, if right now you observe your experience, you'll notice that this is true. You cannot actually do anything. Prakritaiva cha karmani kriyanani sarvashaha. In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the first teachings that Sri Krishna gives Arjuna in the context of Sankhya Yoga, 2nd chapter, is this. You're not actually fighting this war. It's your body and mind that will fight the war. Prakriti is prakritying. Nature is naturing. So relax. Step back. See the whole thing as a beautiful painting and enjoy its beauty. Be mad with joy, even at evil, knowing that nothing affects you. This is so important because Prakriti cannot do anything, so it cannot contain in the Western sense of the word contain. Oh, God damn it. What I hate about these zins or whatever is that they're so easy to lose, like my mind. Anyway, okay, I found it. So, Prakriti, this is so important. Prakriti contains herself. She's self-contained. Therefore, she's swatantra. So, Kali is swatantra because she's free and moved by her own instinct. Shiva is swatantra because he doesn't need to control that. What can he gain or lose from controlling or directing? In other words, what do we really gain or lose from staying in the airport or leaving the airport? That's my point, right? We could circle around Chaos Harbor forever, and we'd be just as happy as if we left Chaos Harbor and went to Circle K and sat with the ants and talked about all those cool Arizona plants, right? We would be just as happy at a warehouse rave as we were. I mean, did you notice? Weren't we just as happy in the airport as we were at the Circle K as we were at the rave? I was just as happy throwing up and passing out, and I was just as happy. Oh, by the way, that guy, we met this guy, he offered us all Maseratis and told us to come to Germany, to some small quaint town in October, to Hindu marry him and his fiancée. His fiancée didn't seem too keen though. He was just kind of like, oh yeah, like this guy's gonna marry us. Like the first time they ever met us, right? Anyway, and then he wanted to race in the Maseratis, and I'm like, look, listen, I don't know how to drive this. I just love the Trident. He that's it. It was so funny. I was like, I can't race you right now. I don't know how to drive this fucking Maserati. It was so great. And he was like, Poseidon is my uncle, but Hades is my father. He was such a cool guy. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, I had so much fun with that, but I also had fun in my K-hole. You know what I mean? It's like the whole thing is just fun. Like every single moment is fun. But notice, Prakriti is just Prakriti. Whether in the airport or the Circle K, whether you're being contained or released, all of that is within Prakriti, right? And you're here, you're in some random IG group. Like, you're here, and appearing to you is all that. Containment and release, containment and release. The containment we're talking about here is a higher order containment. Right? The higher order containment, which is just the ability to observe both containing and releases. Right? I'm resisting the urge to get into more anecdotes here, but there's so much that Prakriti does for us in refining and purifying and, like elevating our discussions about masculine and femininity. And so now notice, Shiva is the container by virtue of not needing to hold or release or direct. And the reason I mean is, what do you need to direct? Right? Like, so I was going to ask guys, like, is it good that, like, quote unquote, using new age terms now, masculine energy contained and directed, the feminine energy out into, like, even someone said that to me, like, the other day. It's like when we Like, and it's valid, right? It's all, this is all true. It's true in one sense. Like, when we kicked that guy out, like, I was like, there was a cup full of pee, but we didn't know whether or not it was pee. It was in the corner of this like closet, and it was like a cup full of pee, like a Taco Bell like large size pee. Was it pee or was it tea? And I was like, I'm really glad I'm here, because my Agori sadhanas make me uniquely suited to verifying whether or not this is tea or pee, which is an important detail in the drama that we were like in, right? So I lift the cap and I like sniff it. It's nauseating. It was straight up pee. But it's like, don't worry, I've drank this stuff before. It's fine. So then I'm like holding this thing, and there's like this big trash bag, and my sister tries to pick up the trash bag, and I'm like, no. It's okay. Even if you weren't my sister, and even if I didn't love you, like, as a woman, like, you don't need to pick this up. Like, chivalry still exists. I got this. So I like took the trash bag and walked out. And I'm making masculine, feminine statements with regards to chivalry, and like with regards to like gender and sociological ideas. And then it was so sweet because at the end, Devi was like, yeah, I'm glad you were here because we needed that masculine energy to like just get this done, to like take everything out and like lock the door. Like it was like the expression here was of action, and that action is like decisive action, and the willingness to like touch disgusting things in one sense is like a masculine thing, and they were like happy that that was there. But at the same time, the two women that I was with, we were having the conversation about how one of them is very action oriented and the other is very feeling oriented, and we're talking about Sun in Scorpio versus Moon in Scorpio and Scorpio Mars and like things like that. So the same action orientedness that they were happy that I was demonstrating in that situation as a man was also later celebrated in that one woman, in the pair of women who was also action oriented. You notice this thing? How flexible and fluid this is? And then my ability to like smell the pee. Notice it's a woman in childbirth who's able to deal with all bodily fluids and all, like, she's way more able to like endure. The idea of Sita being able to hold space for something uncomfortable. It's a feminine quality that is celebrated in Sita. Do you see the point? Again, this part of the discussion is like confusing because we're talking about things that are so inherently paradoxical. All I'm trying to show, as Sonu showed so much more elegantly than I did, is this just this. It's like when you say one, you mean the other. One implies the other. The obverse and reverse of the same coin. I'm just going to relegate all of that to Prakriti. I'm talking about Shiva. Now, not in that context. Do you see? That's why we decenter body and mind, we decenter conditioning, we decenter culture. And we recenter here you as Purusha, experiencing also Prakriti. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Are they different? So now we can get the Ardha Nareshwara idea. If Prakriti is all the dynamic, immanent, changing stuff that happens in the world, and if Purusha is that transcendent by virtue of being unchanging and by virtue of being formless, if that formless, unchanging, static Purusha is you, then is the world other than you? Because Sankhya would say so, right? Sankhya would say the world is there and you are here. And you are the experience of the body, mind, and world. But we say in this tantric non-dual model, it's like there's no way in which I can say Purusha is separate from Prakriti. Prakriti is separate from Purusha because Prakriti is experienced within Purusha. In fact, I would say all Purushas, if you want to use a Sankhya model of a plurality of Purushas, all experience the same Prakriti. But all the Purushas and the Prakriti which they all share, all of that is in me, Shiva. So now you have a higher concept of Shiva. Shiva not just as Purusha, as an individual perceiver, individual unit of consciousness. Shiva as consciousness itself, in which all minds exist. So the minds are Purushas actually. The minds are individual units of consciousness. And Shiva is that which contains all these individual units of consciousness and also the Prakriti which they're conscious of. So when I say Shiva, I'm not referring to the individual first-person experiencing subject. I'm referring to the transpersonal first-person experiencing subject, which you actually are. So right now, if you feel yourself at your essence, notice you are not the body and mind, and as such, you are not separate from any other Purushas. All other Purushas who are not bodies and minds are all one Purusha, and you are that Purusha, Tattvamasi. So that Shiva, is it separate from the Prakriti which is experienced? Is the Prakriti which is experienced separate from that Shiva? If so, prove it. Like I often say, if I can show you one thing without the other, I can prove that they are separate. So if I show you the cap of the Ayurvedic copper water bottle, and if I show you the Ayurvedic copper water bottle, notice I can show you them both separately from one another, therefore they are two different things. But I cannot show you the Ayurvedic copper water bottle without the copper, right? Or without the consumer capitalist desire to sell this at a much higher price because I use the word Ayurveda. Those are extrinsic and inalienable from the Ayurvedic copper water bottle, which cost way too much because of the word Ayurvedic. I remember once, my first retreat that I did in Ojai, I was invited to give a guest talk at this retreat. It was like this super new agey consumer capitalist thing. It was great. And I remember they told me they had an Ayurvedic chef, which was interesting to me. I was like, oh, cool. He was just a regular chef, you guys. There were no like Ayurvedic principles or anything. I was talking to him about it. I was like, oh, cool. I'm kind of like, I don't know very much about Ayurveda, just like what I grew up hearing from my grandmother. I'm like, so like, what's up? This guy knew nothing of Ayurveda, and nor was it important. He was just preparing the food. But it was important in that retreat that they called him an Ayurvedic chef, so that the retreat was like properly a wellness retreat. So and I noticed it had like a placebo effect. People were eating the food and they're like, whoa, this is so fresh and so full of prana and shit. I'm like, dude, this is a white guy making like nouveau American eats. Like, chill. Like, if you didn't use the word Ayurveda, you wouldn't feel that way. So anyway, I don't know about the Ayurveda, but I do know about the copper, right? Like, the copper cannot be separated from the cup, because if I take the copper away from the bottle, will there still be a bottle? No, the bottle is made exclusively of copper. The whole thing is copper through and through. So I cannot show you the copper separately from the bottle. The bottle is the copper, right? The bottle is the copper, but the cap is not the bottle, because I can show you the cap without the bottle and I can show you the bottle without the cap, but I cannot show you the bottle without the copper, since the bottle is nothing but copper. This is subtle, but the world is nothing but consciousness, since I cannot show you the world without consciousness. But I can show you consciousness without the world. That's called nirvikalpa samadhi. But again, it's not even important. Like, if you want to see copper without this bottle, you can. But you cannot see this bottle without copper. For this bottle is copper. So therefore, if you want to see consciousness without the world, you can. But you cannot see the world without consciousness. I even reject this idea. I don't think you can ever see consciousness without the world. Because even an experience of absence is an experience of Kali as void. You're always experiencing something. There's no experiencer without an experience. So even the experience of void, we still call the world. It's just the world as potential. Whereas this world of bodies and minds, the world is actualized. Both of them, whether absence or presence, both of them are called Prakriti. So I don't ever think there's no Prakriti. But anyway, I'm just going to allow for the fact that there can be copper without the bottle, but there can never be bottle without the copper, given it's a copper water bottle. Similarly, there can be the world as a bottle, but it is nothing but copper, and the copper here is consciousness. So I, consciousness, am perceiving a world within myself. The world is not presenting itself to me from outside. The world is appearing to me from inside. So the whole world is internal to consciousness. If that's true, then we say, Ardhanareshwara. Shiva cannot be separated from Kali, and Kali cannot be separated from Shiva. So therefore, Kalidasi, how can someone say to you, oh, you need to be contained? Like, that implies that there's something separate from you that you need to have. It's saying, oh, you are a bottle looking for copper. Or you are a copper looking for a bottle. What nonsense. The bottle is always potentially available in the copper, and the copper is always in the bottle. It is the bottle.
Is there anything to be said about the bottle and the cap both being copper?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to say, right? Like, it's like, this is also the bottle, and this is also the bottle. So in a sense, I'm showing you the bottle. In a sense, I'm showing you the bottle. Right? Like, that's the thing. Like, the problem with metaphors is like they're so, like, they just demonstrate one principle, but they can't like take the whole thing. So like, Sonu expanding the metaphor is important, because again, I don't actually think consciousness can exist without an experience, because it's always experiencing itself, vimarsha. And I don't think an experience can exist without consciousness. What would be an experience without there being someone to experience it? But all that this copper thing is supposed to show you is that there is no world outside of consciousness, and therefore there is no Kali outside of Shiva. Kali is Shiva. But what is Kali? Shiva's ability to present this dance. What is Shiva? That in which the dance is presented. And they are one. Copper water bottle. You know, I can say water bottle, you know I'm talking about copper, and I can say copper, and you know I'm talking about the water bottle. But less so, right? Like, that there's like nuance here. That's the extent of the example. That's why the example cannot be pushed too far. It's not, one example will never capture the whole thing. Therefore, we have many, like clay pots, water and ocean. Like that guy at the rave, I said to him, I'm like, you are the water, not any of the waves. And he said, I'm the motherfucking tides, bro. And I was, touche. He called me Gnostic Jesus all night. I love that he had that nuance. We never got each other's name, but he's like, you know, he said, Gnostic Jesus here is going to smoke a cigarette, so I will too. And I'm like, yep, that's the whole reason I'm being blasted on the internet right now, because I'm smoking a cigarette and you think you should too. Honey, do what you want. But it was cute. I like the way he said it. Like, he was like, hey, Gnostic Jesus is smoking a cigarette now. I'm going to smoke. It's so great. Anyway. I want to read those poems, so I want to get to the end of this soon, because I'm going to make a deeper point. Even deeper than this, if you can imagine. This stuff is already so deep. Tarani was joking with me. She was like, I talk to a lot of guys about this stuff, but all they ever say is, that's so deep. And then she read me one of her poems, and I was so proud. When I got to the end of the poem, I looked and I was like, girl, that's so deep. Anyway, so back to this. There's something deeper to talk about. So let me just like wrap this up. Purusha can never be thought of without Prakriti, and Prakriti can never be thought of without Purusha. So Purusha and Prakriti are then subsumed in another concept called Shiva. And Shiva is what you are, but Shiva is essentially Kali. Right? There's no difference between Shiva and Kali. That's actually important. Because if somebody says to you, Kali Dasi, you need something other than what you have now, that's already, they've made a mistake. Shiva will never be without Kali, Kali will never be Shiva, so you're perfect as you are. You know, Kali Dasi, you and I, our whole Leela is you telling me that you need X, Y, and Z, and me telling you that you don't. Right? You are perfect as you are. Spiritual life is about recognition, not about progressively becoming something. It's not about becoming or attaining or revealing. It is just about recognizing, right? Just do it. Like just do it now. Can we just do it? Like, can you just like be Shiva? Because you are Shiva. Isn't it easy to be Shiva? Because you are Shiva. I am Shiva. I am free. And so are you. Right? We had a nice conversation about cockiness and confidence the other day. We're like, okay, maybe the blurred line between the two is cockiness is saying I am Shiva and you aren't. Or I am free and you aren't. But confidence is saying I can do it and so can you. Right? Like that's what Abhinavagupta is saying. I am motherfucking Shiva, bro. But so are you. And that's not a matter of becoming Shiva. How can Shiva become Shiva when he's already Shiva? Just recognize you're Shiva. And if you are Shiva, notice you contain Kali. So if you are Roy, you are Kalidasi. And if you are Kalidasi, you're Roy. In other words, in that moment, you are both the act of leaving the airport as you are the act of distractedly trying to get out of the airport. Do you know what I'm saying? Just step back. Step back from all the things you previously thought you were. And then include everything you thought you weren't in the concept of what you are. Right? But anyway, let's go deeper. Deeper because this next thing will have more practical significance when we try to define what is a woman. So we already know that Prakriti is defined as the immanent is defined as the changing is defined as the embodied is defined as the sensed, and the sense is defined as the object, which includes all male bodies and female bodies, all male minds and female minds. Okay, done. Purusha is defined as the witness, which is defined as you. So you are Purusha. But I'm going to go further. Prakriti and Purusha are now reconciled in this concept of Shiva and Shakti, because Shiva is Shakti and Shakti is Shiva. Kumbha gatas tatayeva. Oh fuck, I forgot the verse. Abhinavagupta. Kumbhas gatas chetitayeva manyate. Sorry. There's a verse in Abhinavagupta where it's like Kumbha and Gata. Kumbha and Gata are synonyms for a pot. Just like both the words Kumbha and Gata refer to the same entity, pot. Maheshwara sarvam idam jagati. Fuck, I forgot the verse, but like Lord Shiva and the world refer to the same thing, you. So you are Prakriti, you are all Purushas. Right? That's what Shiva and Shakti represent as a composite. But we don't deny that the dynamic, immanent aspect is called Shakti and the transcendent, formless, static aspect is called Shiva. But both contain each other. Okay, so having said that, let's go deeper. When we try to define God, this is so interesting. This is so important and it's so interesting because we all have a different idea as to what that word means. And it's important because when we talk about God, we all talk about it using our own definitions without ever first clarifying what we mean by the word God. That's why we're all so confused. And when we talk about femininity, we're also confused about women because we don't spend the time like defining our terms. It's called lakshana. You cannot do Indian philosophy without first engaging in the process of lakshana, definitions. First define all your terms, then you debate. Then you debate using shared understandings. We don't do that though, we skip a step. When we talk about God, we just use the word, but we don't take the time to purify what that word means, or clarify, or refine what that word means. It's called shodhana. Tattvam pada shodhana, tat pada shodhana, tvam pada shodhana. Define what you are, define what God is. Right? So like, let's talk about God. God could be the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the universe. Sankhya doesn't think so. Sankhya is Nirishvara. It rejects that notion of God. Because Sankhya says, if God is categorically Purusha, and remember in Sankhya, Purusha and Prakriti are categorically distinct. If God is categorically Purusha, and if if Prakriti is categorically matter, if God is categorically distinct from the world, then how can God be the cause of the world? Numbers will never be the cause of colors, and colors will never be the cause of numbers because they're categorically distinct. So if God is different from the world, if God is actually transcended, God will have nothing to do with the world. God will not create, maintain, or destroy the world. So that idea of God as cause is rejected. And so then if God exists, God is just nature. Nature is God. It's almost like a pantheism. You can even imply a pantheism here, where Prakriti is inert, obviously in Sankhya. They won't go so far as to like make a theology out of this. But you could say like, I don't need a transcendent God. It's enough to have an immanent creatrix. So God is just the world. God, if it was something other than the world, could not have any interaction with the world. And would not. If God is God, God is full. Why would God create, maintain, and destroy? That implies a lack. So karma, according to Sankhya, implies karma. We talked all about this last week. We don't need to get into it now. So if God were to create, maintain, and destroy, first of all, God couldn't, because God is categorically distinct. And even if God could, God wouldn't, because God is full. What could he gain or lose from creating, maintaining, and destroying the world? Never mind the nishkama karma of the Bhagavad Gita. Like, that idea is the response to this idea. So then we say, okay, God doesn't exist in Sankhya, except as prakriti lino, as those powers of nature that govern nature, wholly immanent to nature, and they all exist as objects. So we don't even care about God in Sankhya. In yoga, they care about God, but they use the word God in the sense of adi yogi, not as creator, maintainer, or destroyer of the world, but as my teachers, ad infinitum teacher, the primordial teacher. So yoga has a different idea of God. Then the Abrahamic world has a different idea of God, and the Shakta world has a different idea of God. So often people don't like what I have to say because their concepts of God are Abrahamic, and our concepts of God include those, but also reject them in some very important ways. So I'm presenting a God that is lawless and free, drunk and wild, but the Abrahamic world prefers a God that is reasonable and just, a ruler that teaches and helps you grow. So if you say, oh, be the light, don't be the darkness, it's a very Abrahamic idea, because God is light. But in the Kali idea, God is the chaotic darkness, which is transformative and full of infinite potentiality. So I rather be darkness than light, because for me, there's no duality between darkness and light, right? But if you say, oh, you're light, be a light, then you're saying God is light. But by light, you mean reason often, the light of reason. So to be reasonable, to be controlled, to be just, that is the ideal in the Abrahamic world. And so God is king, God is father. Whereas in the Shakta world, God is mother implies a different theology. So notice, once we use the word father and mother, masculine and feminine, in a religious sense, it can actually theologically affect how we approach God and what we think God is, right? Again, I haven't even gone to the deepest material. I'm just warming up. I'm about to get to something, my real cracked idea. Everything I've said before, everything I've said up to now, I've said before. It's like basic Sankhya, right? But now I want to go deeper. So notice, if we were to define the term God, we get into some ambiguity and some complexity here. So if I say God has form, that's called Saguna Brahman. If I say God is without form, that's Nirakara. But if I say God is impersonal, that's Nirguna Nirakara. So a personal God with form and a personal God without form are distinct. The Abrahamic world prefers a personal God without form. Saguna Nirakara Brahman. Whereas the Hindu world, even if it wants God with form, might still insist upon, even if it wants God as a person, it might still insist upon God with form. So God is not only a person, God is a blue boy playing a flute. Whereas the Abrahamic world would say that's idolatry. God has no form. And much of the Hindu world might say that too. Alak Niranjana or something. God is that which has no form, but is still a person that you can pray to. In Islam, God has 99 names, but is formless. And you cannot even artistically represent God except as Quranic calligraphy, right? In my view, words are also forms. So anyway, I don't need to get into it. But there's no way that God can't have a form. But anyway, I don't want to debate these concepts. I just want to present that definitions differ. And if you have a different definition from me and we use the same word, we're not going to agree. And we can't actually debate productively. We have to first start by defining God. So God is that word which includes all these possible interpretations. With form or without form. With personality or without personality. So the impersonal formless God, Nirguna Nirakara Brahman, is what Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism more or less champions. The Saguna Nirakara is what Abrahamic faiths and many faiths in India also champion. Whether or not they are, saying that God is reasonable and just, or whether the God's wild and free. Even Kali can be understood in this Nirakara way, but with Saguna. So Kali is a woman, but she's a formless void who is, wild and chaotic and free. But then there's also Saguna Sakara. Saguna Sakara is when that God is with personality and with form. So God the person who is a woman with wild hair and arms and holding weapons and whatnot. And then you could say there's an avatara, which some religions accept and some religions don't. Some religions say God can never be a person. Other religions say the best kind of God is God that incarnates in historicity as Jesus Christ, as Rama and as Krishna. So avatara is God. In fact, you can even say Guru is God. So Guru is God. Avatara is God. Sometimes your Guru is also the avatara. Like if you're a Christ disciple or Ramakrishna disciple, you lucked out because your Guru is actually the avatara. But if you're not, you can still see your Guru as God, even if your Guru is not an avatara. But so we can say the concept of God is so diverse. Like the Guru is God, the avatara is God, the Saguna Sakara, personal form is God, the Saguna Nirakara, the personal without form is God, and the impersonal formless is also God, or Godhead, some people like to say. Okay, having said this, first you must define our terms. Now coming to femininity, I hope we've done something for that. Like we've defined femininity as the changing, as the dynamic. So that which is dynamic, that which is changing, that which is the object is called Prakriti, and that which is non-dynamic and static is called Purusha. So thus far we've both defined God and we've defined woman. So I'm just going to define God now as the highest most absolute principle by virtue of its ability to subsume all other principles. So the most inclusive, most far-ranging idea of God is the best idea of God. I'm just going to axiomatically present that. Abhinavagupta presents that in chapter 1 of his Tantra Loka and Tantra Sara. He says, the most inclusive God is the best God, right? Okay, now let me get to the best part of the lecture, and then we'll close and we'll open the floor. So, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Marduk slays Tiamat. Around the same time, culturally speaking, Hammurabi codifies the law. Notice, the function of the conscious mind is to codify, is to define. The function of the conscious mind is to use concepts in order to control our experience, more or less along the lines of what Kalidasi was saying earlier about containing and controlling. Right? The conscious mind rides the dragon, as it were. It controls and contains. Like when an inspiration comes, if you don't have a conscious ability to articulate that inspiration, you're just mad. Right? Inspiration comes out of nowhere. It's a bolt from the blue. All genius type individuals are mad. They're crazy. Look at Einstein, right? Like one of the greatest intellects of our time. But the guy was always messy. His hair was always messy. He's like cracked out kind of. But here's the difference. The difference between Einstein and the prophet on the side of the street under the bridge who everybody walks by and never looks at is the ability to ride the dragon. Right? Like in other words, a person who can articulate his insanity is called a genius. A person who cannot articulate his insanity is called mad. That's the only difference. Do you notice? Like there's literally no difference between me and a raving lunatic on the street except that I give lectures. I'm just a raving lunatic who gives lectures that people like. And so I'm not on the street. Like I can pay my rent for now, barely. But like the fact that I can pay my rent is actually only because I can articulate my madness. Right? That's the function of the conscious mind. It defines, it articulates, it uses concepts, it delimits. So the power of language is the power to delimit. You see? This is very, very, very important. Because what Hammurabi does by hammering the law into the stone is he's defining law. He's codifying it. He's containing it. He's directing it. Basically, he's trying to manage the unpredictability of society by having a code or code of conduct. When you're sitting in a circle, even in the context of a Gakaka court, your ability to advocate for yourself is directly proportional to the ability of your conscious mind to, in a calm and controlled way, express what you mean. If you feel something, you don't know how to express it, then you're not like refined in your conscious ability to articulate. The more refined your conscious mind is, the smarter you are, the better able you are to like respond to inspiration, which is always a bolt from the blue. Right? So, it's not wrong for Hammurabi to have done this. But this is where we get into the trouble. Not when we ride the dragon, but when we kill the dragon. So what Marduk is doing now is he is so afraid, as it were, of the chaos of the subconscious mind that Marduk, as the embodiment of the conscious mind, is not trying to harness and direct the subconscious mind. He's trying to kill the subconscious mind. And the way he does it is by chopping it up and delimiting and saying this is not that, which is what we do in the conscious mind. We say this is this and that is that, and then we add one more thing. This is the problem. Saying this and that is not the problem. You know, I like to talk about the diversity of religions, but at no point am I going to say one religion is better or worse than the other. So I can still use my conscious mind to discern the differences between Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman, Sakara and Nirakara Brahman, Avatara and God, Purusha and Prakriti. I can still have this like conscious, logical discussion with you, but at no point am I going to say this is right and that is wrong. Right? That's the second order function. So now the conscious mind doesn't just delimit or discern, it also judges. So the judgment then comes in and says, this is this and that is that, and this is good and that is bad. Right? Isn't that interesting? And this is what we do in religion. Like we say, my way is the only way. I am the truth, the way, and the life, and everybody else is wrong. So this is interesting because this is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna doesn't do. And this is exactly why the Shakta tradition and the Indian world, I would say, is so tolerant, nay, not tolerant, but celebratory of difference. Because they can accept difference, acknowledge difference, discern that these things are different, and use all the powers of the logical mind to establish those differences, both internally and externally when they articulate these views. But Arguably, the vast majority of Indian philosophers have also had this, like, I'm going to say, very motherly and feminine ability to include and say that too is also true. Might not be true for me, but it's true for you. Therefore, Hinduism has such diversity. The word Hinduism implies so many different theologies, so many different ideas of God, and all of them can be included in Hinduism. When the Mughals came and taught us their Islam, we accepted it. We assimilated it. When the British came and taught us their Christianity, we added Christ to our list of avatars along with the Buddha, Rama, and Krishna. Notice the Indian mind, I'm going to say, is a feminine mind because its ability to include and contain is present. But it's also a very logical and masculine mind because its ability to discern is also really developed. So India is highly sophisticated in its logical conceptual structures and its ability to discern and articulate those differences. But it's also highly refined in its feminine, symbolic, and subconscious feature because it's able to hold space for a lot of conflicting ideas, paradoxical ideas. So that's why we do this. We don't say yes or we don't say no. Because yes is one thing, no is another thing. And we say both of those things can be contained in some third thing, which is the elephant head shake. So, okay. I'm getting to the end of my rope, I think. So before I hang myself, which is I'm actively doing that now, I'm realizing like I'm getting to a place where my mind is melting. It's becoming imagistic and symbolic. Yeah, his lingam cannot find the end of the yoni and yet he doesn't stop penetrating. Do you know what I mean? The joy of Shiva's penetration of the yoni is that he will never finish, he will never exhaust the chaotic space of the subconscious mind. The conscious mind can probe and probe and probe all it wants into the realm of the subconscious. The lingam can penetrate as far and deep as it wants to the yoni and the yoni will never be exhausted by it. So in one sense the yoni is greater because it just contains the lingam. So now I flip it around. What contains what? Is the yoni contained by the lingam or is the lingam contained by the yoni? Have more sex and ask yourself which is containing what. If the masculine contains, then that's not actually biologically true because it's the yoni that envelopes the lingam, no? What gives birth, the man or the woman? The woman. So where do ideas come from? Not from logic, conscious mind, but from the womb. But the womb can be inseminated. In other words, you can continually plunge into it with your inquiry, and by continually penetrating it, which is wonderful, it's delightful. Kali loves to be figured out. She wants you to think about her. Even if she knows you will never exhaust her. You cannot define her, but your attempt to try is pleasing to her. You know? And importantly, she gifts you the bolt from the blue. And now this bolt, this Shakti comes, and if your mind is not able to handle it, then she tramples over you. If your mind is able to handle it, then she dances on you. So whether you're a genius or a madman, really the difference here is your conscious ability to hold that Shakti. But when it's so strong and you're a child and you're not able to hold it, you're traumatized by it, you want to kill it. So what we do to the feminine is we put the body in a bag, we put them behind the purdah, we kill them actually. And you know how we kill them? Through ideology. We tell women things that they internalize, that they should apologize and be meek and mild, or etc., etc. But what we do to women, to the bodies that we call women, what we do to nature, which we think of as a woman, is what we do to ourselves. As long as we continue to cut up the dragon of the subconscious mind, as long as the dragon is something to be defeated, the way we treat women and the way we treat nature will be much the same, as something to be subjugated and controlled. You see? So why do we revere Shakti? Because of her creativity. And why do we revere her chaos? Because it's in that chaos that infinite possibility is available. But that doesn't mean we get rid of Shiva. Like, we don't say the conscious mind has nothing to do, but its role should not be to kill the dragon, nor should it be to ride the dragon. Rather, it's to support the dragon. So the third view here is that the role of the conscious mind is to lie down and let Kali dance. So the role of the conscious mind is to serve the subconscious mind. So a poet is devoted to their subconscious mind, right? Arguably, you lose magic and poetry when you subjugate the subconscious mind and insist upon your categories as being absolutely true. This is not that, without any space for this and that being included in some secret third thing which contains them both. And this is right and that is wrong. So if you make a psychological point here, using Erich Fromm and the concept of the father as judge and mother as unconditionally loving. Erich Fromm, the psychologist, would say it's not about gender. It's about psychological roles. That love which is conditional is called the father's love. And that love which is unconditional is called the mother's love. And both are necessary for psychological development. So if you had a single parent, that parent could either be a father or a mother or both, depending on the kind of love that they introduced you. So if their love was contingent upon you growing up and demonstrating value, that's a father's love. So you earn a father's love. Whereas a mother's love can never be lost. It's unconditional. Now think of Sri Ramakrishna's example of the mother and her 5 children. The 5 children all have different proclivities and appetites. One child wants this kind of food, the other child wants that kind of food. The mother doesn't say this food is right and that food is wrong. The mother understands that different children have different needs and different appetites. So she prepares 5 dishes for 5 children. One who likes the fish curry gets fish curry. One who likes the fish pickle gets fish pickle. One who likes the porridge and can only, maybe has no teeth, can only chew porridge, is given the porridge. The mother's ability to provide 5 separate dishes to 5 children of different dispositions is how Sri Ramakrishna thinks of God. God as mother, or God as woman, is the kind of God that can hold within itself paradoxes. It's not the God that says my way is the only way and your way is wrong. It's not a God that judges. It's a God that includes. So Mother Kali, if we say mother, we're not emphasizing her nurturing function necessarily. We're not even necessarily emphasizing her dynamism. The kind of dynamism we mean when we say Mother Kali is her flexibility. Real dynamism, psychologically speaking, is the ability to hold 2 separate truths and see them both as true. So I can say, don't eat meat. And I can say, it's good to eat meat. And both are true, depending on who you are. Right? This is the unique function of Indian religion. Like, the concept of Shakti in Indian religion is a concept of dynamism. But I want to extend the discussion and say dynamism is actually flexibility, which we see in John Keats when he introduces the idea of negative space. Like, a poet is able to hold 2 truths at once. The same thing we saw in Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. They were complex individuals. Like, people always quote Vivekananda to me in order to get me to stop doing Vamachara, Kalachara stuff. I love it when they do that, because then I just throw Vivekananda back at them. And I'm like, it just depends what Vivekananda you want to quote. But you are being a man about it when you say my Vivekananda is the only way to read Vivekananda. People always tell me how I should think of Ramakrishna and how I should think about Vivekananda. Ramakrishna or Vivekananda would never have done that to me. They would have never told me that this is the only way to think of me. They would allow for me to think of them the way I wanted, and then from that, they would meet me where I was and deepen what I was. They wouldn't turn me into something else. They would make me the best version of myself. That's the kind of God that Sri Ramakrishna wants to put before us. So God as mother is Shakti. Shakti is dynamic, is flexible. It's that flexibility which John Keats calls negative space, which is what we ultimately mean by Shakti. So if you say Shakti is just kind, that's non-dynamic, because you're saying she can only be kind. You're locking her into the kindness. And if you say Shakti is cruel, right? Then again, that's locking her in. The better thing would be the more inclusive thing, which would be to say she's both cruel and kind. She's neither and both. So what Nagarjuna does is he says it's neither, nor is it both. It's not yes and it's not no. What we do is we flip Nagarjuna and we say the Shakta view is it's all. And so in a sense, Nagarjuna is a Shakta, because Nagarjuna, by negating all, is making room for all, as it were. We're just trying to be more explicit. We're saying all religions are true, everyone is valid, and that's something a mother is more likely to say, if we use Eric Fromm's word. A mother just unconditionally loves everyone. So my guru is like that, like I've never seen him express distaste I've never seen him disparage anybody. He has a mother's heart. He just loves everybody equally and allows people their eccentricities, and has always allowed me mine. And that's the only kind of guru that I could have had. If I had a guru who was a father, I would have rebelled, right? If I had a God that is a father, then I would be Satan. In the Abrahamic view, I am Satan, right? Obviously, because I prefer personal freedom over sovereignty to God. Especially if that God is a king, I will subjugate myself to the rule of no king. I myself am a king. I was born a Kshatriya. The sovereignty in my heart means I will be no one's subject. I will subject myself to my own will. And so if somebody comes and tyrannizes me and says, do what I want you to do, I'm not going to. Right? I want to do what I want to do. So if what you want me to do is different from what I want to do, and you insist that I should do what you want to do, I'm going to gather an army of other people who want to fight for personal sovereignty, and I'm going to dethrone that God. As such, I am a child of the light bringer Lucifer, in the Abrahamic sense, right? Because I'm championing the idea of personal sovereignty over the idea of God's sovereignty. Because to me, God is sovereignty, and when you express your sovereignty, you are your most godly. So this idea of God as sovereign, as swatantriya, I think is only possible when you allow everyone to be what they are. Swadharma, when you hold space for everyone to be that. So then we say, that's what Kali does. She holds space for everybody and allows them to be everybody. And what we should do is we should hold space for her in the sense that we're allowing her to be whatever she wants to be without defining her as this or that. So I once gave a talk about Swamiji at the Vedanta Society. And I remember I had a thesis of why Swamiji represented one view versus the other, and the whole time in the talk I was pointing to contradictions and tensions in Swamiji's life. Within the same passage of the complete works of Vivekananda, you'll see that he expresses 2 very different ideas. Right? Even the passage I just referenced, he will say, children sometimes find glass beads in the mud puddle. That is the good of the world. So he's expressing a transcendentalist Kevala Advaita view. In that very same breath, he will say, now see the world as God's play, enjoy everything, including evil. Right? Like, notice he both embraces the world and rejects the world in one passage. Within like one sentence, you get both views, and they're contradictory and they're tense within him. You feel a tension within Swamiji between the Kevala Advaita monasticism and this mad Bhairava. He's both Sadashiva and Bhairava, and at times he doesn't know whether he should be Sadashiva or Bhairava. He's like he's tensely between these two poles. The point of my lecture was to resolve the tension, which is when I realized how masculine I was being. I was resisting John Keats' negative space. I was not willing to allow both things to be true at the same time. I was trying to reconcile a paradox. When I realized all I should do is point to the paradox and delight in its dynamic tension. It's good that Vivekananda was more than one thing. Let's not confine him into being one thing. It's good that nobody can say what Kali is. And yet we still try. Do you know how beautiful is that view? And now, I will close with my anecdote, my Phoenix anecdote. So it was so cute. We were all outside looking at the sky. And I remember thinking, I was like, wait, this is the most primordial experience we've had as human beings. 3 guys with long hair standing outside looking at the sky shirtlessly on mushrooms. Like, I was like, this is like how religion was invented. I was like, yeah, at this point, this is when God was invented, laws were invented, like kind of like just like a high thought, right? We were all looking up. And then I was like, hey, like, no, then Cisco G was like, I've never got onto the roof. And I'm like, let's go. So then we like get a bunch of things together to like climb onto the roof, and we made it to the roof. And Cisco was like, I love doing things that my mother told me I wasn't supposed to do. And it was beautiful. We got up on the roof, and there was another guy in the house, right? And he's in the house, and it's so beautiful because he didn't know that we went up on the roof. So the 3 of us are up on the roof, and we're like, oh, and we talk about our friend who's downstairs. I'm like, he must be wondering right now where we are. And then I realized something. If he were to try to logically deduce where we were, he probably wouldn't be able to do it, because the thought that we were on the roof was very unlikely to occur. And yet you could have a very logical process of trying to deduce where we are. It's like, okay, are they in the living room? No. Are they in the kitchen? No. Are they in the bathroom? No. You can logically try to like via negativa figure out where the people are, but it might not even occur to you that they're on the roof. Right? It's kind of like out of the box to be on the roof. So in a sense, the thought that, oh my God, they must be on a roof can only come through inspiration, not through logic. Do you know what I mean? Like, logically, he's confined to what is like culturally available. Notice, this is going to be hard for me to articulate because it's like not fully developed thought in my mind. But notice, our ability to use logic and reason is always going to be culturally conditioned, because the data set that we have is just what is culturally given to us. A genius and a mad person are both people who are responding to something outside of culture. That is the nature of their eccentricity. They're bringing something into the cultural discussion that wasn't there before. In other words, every act of genius and every act of inspiration must be unreasonable. Do you see? If it was reasonable, it would be available to reason. But the only thing that is available to reason is that which is available in the data set. And the data set is just as what is present in the culture. So because it's not often that you go up on the roof, especially when there's no ladder or stairway leading there, like because it's not often that you expect people to be on the roof, then in your reasoning process, you probably won't reason out that they're there. Do you see? It's like a bolt from the blue, to use that phrase again. It must suddenly occur to you. And it's kind of unreasonable that we're on the roof. Do you know what I mean? There's no reason for us to be on the roof except for beauty and like fun. So beauty and fun will always be unreasonable, because it's like, you can't really, what's the reason they're on the roof? I don't know. We're on mushrooms, we want to look at the sky. And like, it's like kind of weird to say, and so it wouldn't have occurred to him, right? Except as an inspiration. This is so important to me, because inspiration, poetry, beauty, like God, religion, is always that which is outside the circle of reasoning. Swami Vivekananda expressed a similar idea somewhere, that reasoning can only reason within a small circle. All of our religious facts come from beyond that circle, as grace, as gifts from God. And then within that circle, we articulate those facts. Right? Therefore, if Marduk represents reason, God cannot be discovered through reason, because reason can only reason within its circle. God is Tiamat, the dragon, which is beyond reason, and that's what we call chaos. So therefore, Kali cannot be a god of reason, because that's a very limited god. It's a god that says this is different from that, and it's a god that might even say this is better than that, and that is the god that your religions have sold you. Because that's a very consumer capitalist friendly God. Because that's a God that can support wars in order to take resources from other countries. The God that we are presenting to you is harder to commodify, because this is a God that says this and that. Even if you want to insist that this is different from that, both are equally true and both are equally valid. This is a God of chaos, the infinite potential of the void, which is beyond the mind. So therefore, the practitioners of this religion might appear to you to be very eccentric, unreasonable people. They're actually doing everything they can to disrupt the mind. When they're vegetarians, they eat meat. When they're scared, they go towards the thing that scares them. When society has values, they transgress those values. All they're trying to do, essentially, is to go beyond the limited scope of cultural conditioning. They're going beyond reason. They're trying to be unreasonable. So you cannot really reason with them. Do you know what I mean? You can't reason with the Kali Bhakta because what they're doing is not reasonable. What they're doing is inspired and poetic because they worship the God, which is maximally inclusive, maximally poetic. And to be maximally inclusive and to be maximally poetic is to be maximally unreasonable and maximally chaotic. Now, the role of the conscious mind is to support that. If the conscious mind wasn't present, it would be so much power. The subconscious mind, like an ocean, would break upon the shores of the body and mind and destroy it. That's why Kali sadhana is often regarded with a bit of fear, because it takes courage to enter into the dark cave of the unknown. It takes courage to sail beyond known shores into the vast ocean. And all the individuals that we've celebrated in humanity have been people who have done that. 99% of them, I'm going to say, have done that unsuccessfully. They've gone into the ocean and drowned, right? They entered into the cave and never came out. But some people learn to swim in that chaotic ocean. Some people learn to navigate the chaos of the dark cave, and they came back to tell us about it. They did their best to tell us what they found, or what found them rather, in words that we may understand. But they had to resort to poetry, to art. We had to resort to the image of Kali dancing on Shiva. That's all we could do, because that conveys something multivalent, something symbolic. And the power of a symbol is exactly like I was saying last week, the power of the Sanskrit language. It's multivalent. A symbol means many things. So do you remember when that girl was in our house and she was screaming at me? She kept saying, Kali is time, Kali is time, Kali is time. Now, the reason I said learn Sanskrit first is because the thing to understand about Sanskrit, even if you never learned Sanskrit, the thing to understand about Sanskrit is words don't just mean one thing. What she was doing is very masculine. She's a woman, right? But she's acting like a man. That's my point. She's acting like a man because she's saying that my view is the only view. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't think she has the authority to talk about Shaktism just because she's biologically a woman. And I don't think I don't have the authority to talk about Shaktism just because I'm biologically a man. Do you see what I mean? My point here is that what makes femininity and masculinity in the psychological sense is the ability to hold more than one thing, even paradoxical things as true at the same time. That to me is more feminine than saying one thing means only one thing. And more importantly, if we define femininity as a subconscious mind, we're talking about a symbolic, imagistic way of thinking. And this way of thinking is multivalent necessarily, like the Sanskrit language. The dhatu of any word like Deva or Kali will mean many things. So if we define Kali, and by the way, when we define Kali, we're trying to define both God and woman, because Kali is that God who is a woman, and Kali is that woman who is a god. So in closing, now when I offer you the definition of Kali, I'm actually offering you both the definition of a woman and of God. So let's just go for it. Kshepo jnanam sankyam gatinada kramat kalanam iti kali kala sankarshini iti abhidhiyate. So abhida, the concept of lakshana defining, iti abhidhiyate, the definition of Kali is shepo, that which throws out. Jnana cha sankhya, that which cognizes and that which delimits. Kramat, that which is a sequence or a process. Gati nada, that which is moving or dynamic, and that which is resonance. Kalanam, that which imagines or that which self-reflexively understands itself. That is Kali, who is the devourer of worlds. So if you say Kali destroys, that's only one definition of the root for the word Kali. If you say Kali is dynamic, again, that's only one definition. Kali is also the projector, container, and dissolver of the world. So Kali is God, because if God is defined as the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the world, then Kali is God. But God is the dynamism of consciousness to project, maintain, and destroy. So therefore, Kali is kramat, sequence, the prakriti of involution and evolution. Involution and evolution. Kali's resonance, mantra, again, that's a whole other thing, we don't need to get into it, like word and resonance and all that, that's dynamism for consciousness. But then also, it's so important to point out that Kali is also the power of imagining. Kali is art and poetry. Kali is inspiration. And Kali is language. Kali is the limiting function that not only in terms of time and space, but in matrika, the matrification of the world is a feature of language. So Kali is the language that delimits. Kali is the space in which things are known and ultimately labeled by that language. Kali is that space from which the things are projected and the space into which things are dissolved. So Kali is Shakti in that she's dynamic. Kali is God in that she performs all these functions. And God is dynamism. I'm going to add now to this discussion that God is flexible. And that to me is the glory of the poetic, symbolic subconscious mind. It can just be in John Keats' negative space. Do you know? So as I'm on the roof, my two friends leave the roof, and I'm there by myself, and I'm pacing, kind of thinking about this stuff. And it occurs to me there's no way actually, if I was that guy, to have really arrived at the conclusion that everyone is on the roof, except as an inspiration. Do you know, I'm looking at the sky and looking at these clouds and just like thinking like every idea that I've ever had, every song that I've ever written, every artist, every intellectual will always have this sense, right? Like it just comes out of nowhere. You just suddenly are made aware of something. And then that's what we call grace. Like on some level, these new combinations of thoughts, just old thoughts being understood in new ways, new configurations, SM plasticity, that's what we call grace. It seems to come out of nowhere, and that's what we revere. Everything that we've ever like done as a human civilization is based on our openness to receive that bolt from the blue and our integrity to hold it and articulate it. So then there's a role for the conscious mind, and it's a servant of the subconscious mind, and therefore Shiva is included in the image, but as God's husband, and here as that being that allows her to be what she is. So the more you can allow your subconscious mind to influence your conscious mind, and the more you can hold in your conscious mind what is influenced by the subconscious mind, I'm saying the same thing in different ways, the more of a Shakta you can be, right? So like having said all of that, there was another anecdote. I'm like lying down and I'm looking up at this cloud. And it was so cute because it was like a dragon kind of swallowing the world. And I was just thinking of Rahu and Ketu and Uranus and Gemini. And I'm like, look, it's like Rahu is like devouring the moon or something. And I'm like making meaning of this cloud. And then something occurs to me. I'm like, I wonder if this is an omen. Because I said something about Datura and then I saw a hummingbird and I was like talking about omens and stuff, right? So I was like wondering, like, to what extent is this an omen? And what does this omen mean? And I'm lying down on the roof and Devi is like sitting next to me. And then she like just looks at me. Suddenly she like very intently looks at me, you know? And I look at her and she just laughs. She just starts laughing at me. And I'm like, what? And she goes, oh, nothing. Then she goes back to looking at the sky. And that meant everything to me. Because in that moment, my conscious mind was experiencing beauty. It was in bliss. And then it was trying to discern what that beauty meant. First, poetically and elliptically. But then something crept in. This feeling of judgment. Once I started talking about omens, in my mind, it's all internal. Once I thought about the omen, I was like, somewhere, subconsciously, there was is this a good omen or is this a bad omen? Something like that, right? It was at that moment that little bit of fear crept in, that Devi suddenly looked at me with, and by Devi I mean my friend, but I also mean Devi, because what's the difference? She looked at me with such intensity, and then just laughed. It was wonderful. Kali will never judge you, I realize. She'll just laugh at you. And that's what the subconscious mind does. It's in bliss. Kali is always in bliss. How can one who is always in bliss have any fear or anger? It is we who have anger and fear and project it onto Kali. We make a man out of her, you know? But as a woman, she's just going to hold space for my nonsense and laugh at it and not even tell me otherwise, but give me the space and room to come to my own conclusion. So I, as the conscious mind in that moment, saw my own femininity reflected in her. And that woman then, in that moment, like the Gurutva came through so strongly. She was laughing not only at my meaning making in the face of such beauty, but she was laughing at my tendency to judge and then introduce fear in that moment. And the moment she laughed at me, her laughter cured me, not just of my judgment, but in that moment of even my attempt to interpret the dragon cloud swallowing the dragon world. And once that dropped, I was back in that childlike state of just seeing blue, just seeing clouds. And I thought of Einstein and the wildness of his hair, and Kali and the wildness of hers. I thought of the mad and the geniuses of the world. And most of all, I thought about the bolt from the blue, you know? That word, the bolt from the blue, is like to describe inspiration. And I'm looking at the blue sky, and I'm like, wow, I've received the bolt of Kundalini, which negates the mind's meaning-making function. And in this madness, I feel most sane. I feel most present. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu. May the subconscious mind triumph. May image and symbol triumph. May the negative space be the space in which I live. Om. May all be liberated and may all be bound as they like. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om peace peace peace. Jai Ma.